As Meghan Markle devotes more and more time to her favourite person, herself, and hapless Harry seems increasingly lost in California with no point to his empty life, the royal family are fearing the worst. Horror of horrors, the word is that Harry is planning a sequel to his spiteful book Spare, which will fill his personal vacuum and fill Charles, Camilla, William and Kate with dread. The King is particularly concerned that the peeved prince is poised to strike again with a follow-up that will be even more hurtful than his first bombshell biography. Buckingham Palace is on red alert after last week's High Court proceedings pointed towards more disappointment for the Duke of Sussex as he continues his forlorn legal bid to be granted armed police protection. If, as expected, he gets knocked back one more time, the royals are terrified that, true to form, the petulant prince will lash out in literary fury. His nearest and not so dearest know only too well what he's like when he doesn't get his own way. And if he puts ghostwriter pen to paper for Spare 2, the results could be seriously explosive. Ominously, after Spare's publication 2 years ago, as the extraordinarily private revelations were stunning the world, Harry insisted he had been the soul of discretion by declaring people would be shocked by what's being held back. Palace courtiers have always regarded this statement as a veiled threat that Harry is ready and willing to dish yet more dirt. Now, following the latest courtroom battle over his desperate desire to get the same cop gun guards as his hated brother William, the downcast Duke is said to have hinted that he has discovered secrets about the way he and Meghan have been treated. And he's preparing to go public. Already sick of his runaway son's brat-like behaviour sniping from the West Coast wings, the King is reported to have stopped talking to Harry. And the animosity between the seething Sussexes and William and Kate is off the scale. Palace insiders believe that Harry's next book will make the deeply damaging opening salvo look like a walk in the park. But on the plus side, at least it will give the directionless Duke something to do, and perhaps take his fevered mind off the ongoing nightmare of charity chief Dr. Sophie Chandorka's continued allegations that he's a colonial-style white saviour racist bully who has imperiously talked down to her. The petulant prince sensationally quit Sentibale, his own organisation, after Sophie refused to put out a statement of support for Meghan. In a stinging rebuttal that clearly enraged haughty Harry, she stressed that the charity to help the African victims of AIDS and HIV is not an extension of Brand Sussex. Friends say that this disastrous dispute has plunged the Duke into despair, barely able to believe that he stands accused of the same racism he loves to accuse everyone else of, especially his own relatives. Get used to it, ginger nuts, a dose of your own self-righteous medicine. Meanwhile, the question still hangs heavily in the air. What the hell is Meghan doing to support her distraught husband in his darkest hour of need, as he fights his father's government about his personal safety while in Britain and then flies out to dangerous war-torn Ukraine? The difficult Duchess carries on trying to turn herself into a cash cow, cashing in on her semi-royal status in a bid to rake in a tawdry fortune, flogging tat online. Separate Lives doesn't even begin to cover what's going on with this apparently disparate marriage. He's busy doing not much at all, she's busy with her digital jumble sale, and the two of them are hardly ever seen together. Could it be that the voraciously ambitious Ms. Markle has reached the top of the lucrative recognition ladder and has no further need of the royal renegade who got her there? Meanwhile, this odd pair are apparently attending couples therapy sessions, and Harry is said to still be struggling to cope after watching his future spouse's sex scenes on suits. Really? I barely know what to say. You better make your own jokes.
As the dusty history books will tell, Kim Kardashian created a business of cleaning out her celebrity friends' closets and selling the goods on eBay well before there was Ray J. Kim K went by the eBay username Kim's a Princess, an account she started all the way back in 2002. In 2006, a then unknown Kim K was featured on Bestie Paris Hilton's reality show The Simple Life as her official closet organizer. Soon after, more celebrities started calling on Kardashian to help rid them of their crap couture. Clients Kenny G, Rob Lowe, Cindy Crawford, Serena Williams. We talk about her a lot more on this channel than I ever imagined. And Nicole Richie jokingly crowned Kim with the nickname Queen of the Closet Scene. She's been called worse. Today, Kardashian still uses eBay under the radar, and some internet sleuths are convinced that Meghan Markle has jumped on the bandwagon too. In 2019, Kim & Co., with a K, of course, launched Kardashian Closet, with another K, a luxury retail site. So this was to replace Kim Kardashian's big eBay push. The platform features pre-worn items from the closets of Kris, Kim, Kylie, Khloe, and Kendall, with prices ranging from $20 to $9,000. Actually, $9,000 is pretty low when it comes to the Birkin bag I'm about to tell you about as well. It looks like Kourtney no longer participates in the website, and I wouldn't want to either if Kim had treated me so poorly. There are kids' clothes as well. Khloe took some heat for pushing her followers to go buy some of her kids' used clothing, with some users saying, like, there are children that are in foster care that are moving from house to house with a trash bag with used clothing in it, and you're trying to sell us your children's expensive clothing. Like, get a grip. Now, new items are added weekly to the site, and it allows fans to purchase these pieces directly from the family's personal collections. And make no mistake, this allows the family to make a significant amount more than what they were making on eBay's platform. Additionally, they play by their own rules. They don't have to offer refunds, which they don't. They don't offer exchanges. They can deny cancellations. And there are no guarantees on the authenticity of the products. The website is reportedly run by Cynthia Cece Bussey, who's the first cousin of Kris's first husband, the late Robert Kardashian Sr. Full disclosure, I have previously caved. I do own a Kourtney Kardashian purse and a Kris Jenner / Kardashian YSL dress, humble brag. I think what was infuriating about the transition over to the Kardashian closet from eBay was the increase in pricing versus eBay. According to Nylon, some items have been reportedly sold for 9 times their retail value. They are charging you full price for these out-of-season clothes that in reality they never wore, or they are used, which is weird. They're not Elvis jumpsuits live from Las Vegas. They're leggings. Or worse, they were gifted these items for free, then turn around and sell them for $4,000. In fact, in July of 2020, designer Christian Cowan publicly called out Khloe Kardashian on Instagram for selling dresses that had been loaned to her. He shared a screenshot of a blue dress listed on Kardashian Closet on his Instagram stories, writing, "Khloe Kardashian, why are my runway samples I loaned you being sold on your website? We've emailed 3 times and had no response." Kris Jenner's $450 bra and panty set. I know that as we get older, we need industrial strength in this area. But for $450, they better sit under my chin. You know what I mean? That's a lot of dough. Back in 2024, Kim came under fire for putting a dirty Hermes Birkin bag on sale for nearly $70,000 on the resale platform. One Reddit user wrote, "Kim's dirty Birkin can be yours for only $70,000. Seriously, how desperate are they for money?" As a majority of the items on the site are labeled rare, new, and or come with tags. Most items were presumably gifts or packages sent to the family by designers or brands. It's absolutely infuriating. And while Kim's eBay account used to state that 10% of her profits would go to various charities, the Kardashian Closet website doesn't make any mention of proceeds going to charity. In fact, when you Google this website, Kardashian Closet Charities comes up because people are so anxious to see how much they donate to charities through this platform. And the answer is, as we understand it, zero. I mean, it's genius, it's greedy, and dare I say, has Meghan Markle written all over it. Now, what would Meghan's Kardashian closet be called? Duchess drawers? Duchess draws? Sussex's second hand-me-down Duchess? One user dropped a link to a Meghan Markle themed eBay store on Reddit with the caption, 99% sure this is Meghan's personal eBay store. Anyone want that cape dress or a Beckham clutch? So this is what's been circulating online over the last, I'd say, 48 hours. Could this store that's just full of images of Meghan with some of these items, wearing these items, holding these items, could it actually be run by Meghan Markle herself? One user enthusiastically agreed, saying a lot of stuff still has the tags on it. Is she just leaving the tags on? I think this is hers because it's all with photos of her in the items. Can't be a coincidence. It's a store full of items she has worn. Another user replied, we saw. She left the tags on that one dress on her royal tour, referring to Harry and Meghan's first official royal tour in 2018. The internet was ablaze when Meghan was snapped stepping off of a plane after arriving in the Kingdom of Tonga with a tag still attached to her red self-portrait dress. At the time, numerous outlets called the situation an epic fashion blunder and wardrobe malfunction. One online sleuth says, quick look. As a former amateur reseller of 12 years, the shop feedback looks suspiciously like bots. I'm suspect of 100% feedback, 100% positive, I'm assuming, on that many sold items with regurgitated generic praise. Also, how is a person reselling exactly what Meghan Markle wears? I sold for years, and that's just not a resell thing unless it's a person's estate. With the original poster actually replying to this, yeah, and the wording is suspect in the description. Some of it is as worn by Meghan versus like the one Meghan wore, with the sleuth joking, I want to know how she is purchasing and reselling this woman's whole wardrobe. And if it's not Meghan Markle, then she needs to get a restraining order. Another user chimed in, it's been rumored for years that Meghan has had someone else do the graft of reselling her clothes. First, it was Jessica Mulroney. Heck, maybe it still is. My mom and sister used to eBay. It's not hard work, but it is time consuming, and Meghan is too lazy for that. One Reddit user writes, oh my God, doing exactly what she did as a royal. No wonder she rarely repeats clothes. We have suspected this all along. Fantastic detective work. With another user alleging exactly. She was charging an enormous amount to Charles for her clothing, for clothes that didn't fit, all worn only once, and then off to sell them. Someone else writes, wow, good find. Yeah, I do think it could be her eBay store. I recall on 3 occasions, the items she wore/used were obviously still with protection/tag. The self-portrait red dress with price tag still attached on tour to Tonga. The ridiculously enormous Fendi handbag with all the plastic protection on the feet still attached. And the basting thread unremoved from the white jacket that she wore. Many folks already suspected that she was charging Charles full price for the freebies she secretly received for advertisement and resold them with tags still attached. That was why her clothes were never customized to fit her. How many times should I say allegedly during this video? Allegedly, allegedly, allegedly. Does that illegal? Does that work? One Redditor asks, is she that broke that she has to sell stuff on eBay? LOL, exclamation point. With another replying, I think it is just in her genes to make money off everything. Another user agreed, writing, I believe she would go down this avenue, with one observing, oh man, going from royal to selling your stuff on an eBay store. What a precipitous fall. Someone jokes, can she scream desperate any louder? My favorite comment was, this reminds me of when Hilaria Baldwin made her fake Instagram fan page and would post Express shirt from 1998 or pants from Forever 21 on the Fashionista one. God love Hilaria Baldwin. Hillary Baldwin from Boston. Not everyone agrees that the eBay page is Meghan managed. One user argues she would do Poshmark, like Bethany Frankel. Just the name Poshmark would make her feel elevated above eBay. With another user offering an alternative, I don't think Poshmark is high end enough for her. I think she would do the Real Real or similar with all the high end label stuff she would have. Some just aren't buying it. Asking, have you seen the prices? It's too low to be credible. Could she just be monitoring traffic to her personal clothes before trying to sell them at Sotheby's like Diana did? It's Meghan. She thinks she is the Princess of Wales. With one user replying, I don't know. Maybe she is broke and needs the cash. Well, the Kardashians didn't need the cash, but they certainly wanted it. It wouldn't be the first time Meghan has followed in the Kardashians' footsteps. Kim Kardashian signed a podcasting deal with Spotify the same year Meghan Markle did. Meghan's Harry and Meghan reality show follows in the footsteps of the infamous Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and their mothers have been spotted spending time together at local charity events in recent years. So what do you think? Could this be Meghan Markle's latest venture in a sloppy string of impulse launches? Meghan Markle's lack of strategic cohesion has made her look erratic in 2025. What we've witnessed in the last 4 months is brand whiplash. This flurry of launches with no clear through line or brand identity, from underperforming podcasts to a lifestyle series panned by critics and the likes of you. This approach feels more like a panic-fueled blitz than a focused brand strategy. The chaotic rollout featuring everything from loose fruit spread to a commission-based retail platform signals a lack of long-term planning or brand architecture, and just like a copy and paste of the Kardashian playbook. I can absolutely see an eBay store thrown in the mix. Instead of building a strong, recognizable presence in one lane, Markle seems to be sprinting in 5 different directions at once, diluting impact and confusing the consumer. What does she do now? I mean, that's what so many people say. What is she doing now? Is she selling jam? Is she running for president? Is she blogging? Is she writing children's books? Is she hosting a show? What is she doing? Is she doing calligraphy? It's manic. And from a marketing perspective, it looks like desperation masquerading as diversification. Is she an investor? The Kardashians' various business ventures happen slowly and strategically. That's why we're more willing to accept new pursuits without blinking an eye. Kim K is a reality star. She owned a successful gaming company. She transitioned into makeup, underwear. Now she's Ryan Murphy's muse and makes millions legitimately acting. But in the space of 2 decades, I mean, that's a pretty solid time to accept all of these changes and that evolution. Now, in 2 weeks, Meghan launched a new series, a podcast, commission-based retail store, and jam site. It's just hard to digest. And I'm not talking about the jam exclusively, but, there have been some questions surrounding it. While both women could be accused of greed and using men to elevate themselves, only one would be accused of being a savvy businesswoman. Maybe Kim should be Meghan's next guest on her Confessions of a Female Founder podcast. Or maybe Kim should be hosting said podcast, just saying. But I firmly believe, and I've said it for a year now on this channel, that the collab is imminent.
Let's move on to my favourite couple, Meghan Markle. She's been accused of ripping off British authors' book series for a feminist Netflix shows after the writer has spotted striking similarities between her character and the Duchess's animation. Tell us more.
Well, Mel Elliott is a children's author and illustrator, reasonably successful. Pearl with the Power is the books that Mel Elliott has written, which I believe have been reasonably successful. I'm clearly not the target market for them. However, of course, Meghan did plan a book called Pearl, and it was supposed to be in development with Netflix, but mysteriously was dropped. Even Elton John was involved with it, David Furnish, but as part of the $100 million deal, it was dropped. And Mel Elliott wrote to Meghan's people and Netflix saying, what's going on here? And she says, never heard anything back. But it is one of the things that does seem to be leveled at Meghan, that there is, various things, even As Ever, the brand that she's launched, there are people who have said, look, I've got a fashion brand called As Ever. And, she does seem to get herself into hot water now, as Mel Elliott says. I don't know whether she's read it, but one of the things she says, the coincidences do seem uncanny. But, if there are lots of people maybe advising her who somewhere in the subconscious, it's a bit like music, someone saying that they claim that I wrote that song. How do you prove that? But obviously it is interesting that the project didn't actually see the light of day from Meghan's perspective for reasons that we're not 100% clear, but it has proved how hard it is for Meghan and Harry to make that Netflix deal work. And you'd have to say
No, I was going to say Mel Elliott is actually from Hastings. And then she'd written these books, Pearl Power. She got to the book 3, and then, of course, she sent that lawyer letter to... I mean, I'm just adding fuel to the fire here, but she then sent the letter from the lawyers to the Duchess Care of Archwell, as you say, heard nothing back. But she says there are striking similarities in these works. How do I put this nicely? The ventures that Meghan seems to embark upon seem to always have an involvement by maybe just taking inspiration from other things.
Yes. Well, but as most people do sort of lean on experiences, isn't that, but in her case, there does seem to be, the As Ever, sometimes it just seems that trouble follows her in one way or another. Even her latest documentary, people are saying, well, it's copying other people and is very derivative. It was pretty ordinary. And then her podcast as well. And look, she's trying to make her way and make money. Whether it be by getting commission off items sold via the Shop Me website and various other means, and obviously monetizing some of the food that she is promoting in As Ever, the strawberry spread or raspberry spread.
Well, how much was that? 16 quid, wasn't it, for a pot?
Well, I think the honey was 20 quid and I think the 11 quid, but it's all about the packaging, David.
Oh, and the sprinkles, Rupert, and the sprinkles.
Yeah, and the elevating of that packaging to then use it. You could use the jar for putting pens in. But it's all about elevating the experience. So she does, look, she's trying to, she has every right to try and make a commercial venture successful. But obviously there's always the accusations that she's still hanging on to the Duchess of Sussex title. A lot of it's branded and promoted with that, using that title, but her Britishness, which, as I've often said, she doesn't want to embrace anyway. So she's always, and this is the problem, and maybe even Harry's feeling it, she has got an insatiable desire to make money and try and live a billionaire and celebrity lifestyle, whereas Harry has had everything, the ultimate boy with a silver spoon, has suddenly now got to find a way of earning a living. And he's actually, the big wide world is proving rather fraught with difficulties for him personally. Because actually, when you think about it, in the royal family, whatever member of the royal family, however good intentions, everything gets done for you. Even William and Catherine, William's, now he's, interestingly, has given Jason Nuff the job as running Earthshot, who was, of course, communications secretary for Harry and has got a very close relationship with William. But my point being is they get things done, comes around them. They're there to serve. People do it for them. Harry now is in the wild west of having now to try and hasn't got the support network of the royal family, and the only person who can drive it is him. And it's not so easy. And Meghan has clearly, in her eyes, her own agenda, which is to try and make as much money as is possible through her ventures.
I mean, the Daily Mail is reporting it, that Sussexes are in crisis over the clashing goals because, as you say, she wants to be a billionaire and Harry hasn't. That's not even anywhere on his radar. Are they in crisis?
How do we know? Obviously, there's a book, Tom Bower, the much respected royal author, does seem to have an in. But it's interesting, he does say, look, he's not denying her right to make money. But for Harry, I think it really is reflecting, and we can see it, that the things just seem to be unraveling, whether it be the Centre Barley, the court case, and suddenly it's all, he's harking back. But he wants to build bridges. But I can assure you, the royal family, particularly his brother, has no desire to open the hand of friendship at this stage, because there's been so much bad blood from the Sussexes' side that, and with everything else that's going on, William is not prepared to put the energy into it. So that's why Harry feels incredibly rudderless at the moment and has got to find a way, a sense of purpose. Whereas at least Meghan, for all her faults you might think about what she's doing, she is at least trying to do things, whether it be the podcast, dreadful, the programme, dreadful, but that's just my views. I'm not, it's
what do you really
fairly
think?
obvious. Well, you never know. That I'm not, for me, they just didn't work, and the podcast. But she's got every right to try and find a way to make money. It just feels at times a little bit tacky, her need and striving for this, needing to be the centre of attention, and that's proving to be her undoing in the eyes of a lot of people. But she has every right, just like all of us, to go and make money.
Yes. How long have they got together, do you think?
I am no marriage guidance counsellor. I have no counsellor. I have no idea. Look, no one wants to see a breakup of a marriage. So I would hope and they've got 2 children, and you'd hope that they, for the sake of the children, that if there are issues, then like most couples, well, no, they've been married now 7 years, so we're probably into the 7-year itch territory, aren't we? 2018. Don't you know about the 7-year itch, David?
Well, I do. That's why I'm looking at you and saying, ooh.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's not. But that's what, it's just, but I'm sure that's, I'm not saying.
I'm going to say Rupert Bell started that rumour that he's got a 7-year itch.
No. But it is, they've been more married in 2018. I think they are now trying to work out how they go forward. And it's a crossroads moment. And for Harry, he's got to get a grip. He's obviously going to be waiting on this court ruling. I don't think he's busting a gut to come back to this country, even whatever the ruling is, because I don't think Meghan's got any desire to rush back and see her family. That's why I feel that Harry is the rudderless one. He is cast asunder from his family and maybe not have as many of his old friends around to just shoot the breeze with. And he may be ultimately, yes, you have support from Meghan and he's got his children, but ultimately people need a network of friends. And maybe he doesn't have a group of really strong friends with him in California. But I do not wish that marriage ill in terms of it coming to an end, because no one wants to see that. No. And if it does, my goodness me, it will be complicated.
I wanted to talk to you about this book because really you were one of the first authors to mention the fact that perhaps there were issues behind the scenes when it came to the American attitude of Meghan. And this is one thing that we talked about years ago on my To Die For Daily podcast. And I loved the way that you broke down Meghan's behavior versus Princess Diana's behavior. And you go into a little bit about that again here. And I also just have to say, you're always so gentle in the way that you discuss it. You're never cruel. I know that Meghan and Harry complain about cruelty and bullying, but you've always been super gentle and just fact-based in the way that you've described it. So I applaud you for that. Had you ever heard from Harry and Meghan when it comes to your reporting? Because there have been some authors that say that they were threatened with lawsuits. But I'm also like, he's so nice. Surely they're not going to threaten Tom Quinn. Have you ever heard from them regarding some of your reports?
Well, yes, with this latest book, yes, ma'am. I got a letter from their lawyers, but it was amazing. It was actually a very nice letter. I mean, it basically said that they would like to help with any future projects that I might be involved in writing about Meghan and Harry. And it was amazing. They didn't complain about anything. And I think it was because, as you said, unlike most people, I think Meghan got a bit of a raw deal, or she was misunderstood in England. So I tried to be a bit more balanced. And actually, I talked to some of the staff who'd worked for Meghan and Harry, as well as staff who'd worked in Kensington Palace for the other royals. And many of them said that Meghan had this very open, very warm attitude. And the royals, because they are a bit inhibited emotionally, that was one of the things that they found difficult about her. So it was actually a positive. She was warm. She used to, hug whenever she met William. She would give him a hug, and I think William thought, "Oh, what's this?" Because he's very, very knotted up in himself. So I thought, well, Meghan might actually have been criticised for something that most people would think was a positive. Her warmth, her ability to not be emotionally inhibited. So I think that's why we got a letter from her lawyers that was actually almost, it wasn't quite a thank you, but it was almost a thank you.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. Yeah. So I wonder if, there's the argument that we're seeing now with Meghan through With Love Meghan, her Netflix series and her podcast, that there's this lack of authenticity. And is that what Prince William felt with the regular hugs? Or is it, like you said, just not emotionally, that's not where he is? Maybe with his kids, and that's where it probably ends.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture, really. I just think it was such a shock to have this very, very different person arrive in a family which is very formal and very, I don't want to say emotionally cold, but there's something of that. So I think they were surprised, but there was also a bit of the royal family who felt that it was inauthentic, that it was slightly overdone. And I actually think that Meghan probably overdid it a bit because she was nervous. I mean, it must have been so difficult to go into a family with a 1,000-year tradition, and an absolute refusal to change.
Yeah.
But, so she would have been nervous. She would have been apprehensive. So I think maybe being overly affectionate, overly warm, maybe that was too much for the royals, but maybe also it was seen as slightly inauthentic, slightly exaggerated. So in a way, the whole thing was a catalogue of confusions on both sides, slight misunderstandings. And as we know, it ended eventually in disaster.
Well, to stay on this topic, one of the biggest headlines that came out of this book, I remember, was the staff gossiping that Meghan was potentially flirting with Prince William because of the California cuddles. I'll call them, I hug everybody too. So I'm guilty of it. But one staff member told you that this touchy-feeliness caused some very awkward rumors regarding Meghan's relationship with Prince William, and it fueled gossip among staff that it was flirtatious. You say she obviously was not flirting with Prince William. You make that clear, but it apparently led to additional issues with Prince Harry. Was Prince Harry's frustration surrounding the gossip, or was Prince Harry's frustration surrounding Prince William's lack of kindness or lack of? Did Meghan feel this? And was Prince Harry reacting to that?
I think yes, both of those. I think Prince Harry was a little upset that what he saw as his wife's very warm overtures were being slightly rejected and pushed away. I think he was upset about that. But he also had to deal with the fact that there was this atmosphere of gossip about Meghan and William, even though everyone knew that, of course, she was just hugging William because they were related, they were in the same family. But inevitably, because Kensington Palace is a sort of hothouse and there are a lot of staff, you can't control what people say. So I think Harry disliked the gossip but couldn't stop it. But also he was upset a little that his brother couldn't respond to Meghan's warmth. And I think that really speaks to the fact that by then, Harry and William were, in a way, being split by this kind of view. Because, of course, Harry grew up in the same way that William grew up, in a family where you don't overly show emotion, but suddenly he changed sides, which I think made him feel a bit more judgmental about the way his brother, was reacting. I think he would have liked William to just be a bit more relaxed, maybe a bit more Californian.
Well, I should stress that you also write that Catherine and King Charles, Prince Charles at the time that all of this was happening, also tended to flinch. So it wasn't just a Prince William being angry. It sounds like everybody was just kind of like, oh, would all of this not have happened or imploded the way that it did had Prince Harry just been a little more patient when it came to the ultimate marriage? Sometimes it just takes getting to know somebody and understanding that it is authentic, or that they behave this way because, for things to run smoothly. But was there such rejection and hostility because it was too much too soon?
I think so, yes. I think that Harry was impatient with the royal family. He couldn't understand why they weren't able to adapt quickly and accept Meghan. And I think he probably should have, if he had more experience of the world and hadn't been in the sort of gilded cage of the royal family, I think he might have waited. If he was more mature, he might have waited and said, okay, look, this is going to take time. But I think one of the problems with that was that I don't think the royals sort of discuss that kind of thing. They don't discuss how they're behaving. They don't step outside themselves and reflect on how they're behaving with each other. They just do what they've always done. And I think it's unique to the royal family. If you grow up in the royal family, I think you just are. You expect people to accept you as you are. But once Harry was with Meghan, he saw the world in a different way. And as I say, he was just very impatient and forgot that, his brother and the other royals had grown up in this bizarre family where they expect other people to adapt to them rather than accept other people's differences when somebody comes in. I mean, Diane had the same problem, when she came into the royal family, she wasn't given any advice.
Yeah.
And I think if Harry is at fault, really, it's probably because he also assumed that Meghan would just fit in, that she would just learn the ropes as she went along. He probably, along with the other royals, they probably should have done more to prepare Meghan for, what some people have called the ordeal of being part of the royal family. But at the same time, I think perhaps Meghan's impatience, and the support that Harry gave her when she was impatient, I think, for change, to be accepted, I think, that wasn't something that the royals, I mean, they've been around for 1,000 years. They're not going to change. They expect other people to change.
Yeah.
I think that was the key problem.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes I sit back and think that Meghan, coming from a background of being an actress, I sometimes wonder why she couldn't have just tried to play the part until she felt like she was in the groove. But a lot of it, like you said, is about managing expectations, and maybe her expectations weren't properly managed, because in the book you say that she had this typical American view of the royal family, which I hate to tell you, I did too. Castles, glittering balls, and you talk about this limitless wealth and ease. And one staffer actually told you that Meghan expected a billionaire and she got a millionaire. So do you think that when you think about her entering the royal fold, it probably was such a honeymoon, leading up to the wedding? I don't imagine that there were these tough conversations had between Meghan and Prince Harry. And in some cases, reading about Diana's life, I feel like Diana had much more of a sense that she was making a mistake in the hours and days leading up to her wedding than Meghan Markle had.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, in many ways, it was much more difficult for Diana, even though she came from an aristocratic English background, and the English aristocracy share many of the values of the royal family. But it was more difficult because really, Diana's marriage to Charles, it was an arranged marriage. It wasn't a love match. And so Diana found that once she joined the royal family, she was expected to behave as if it was a love match, even though she knew it wasn't. And she knew that Charles was already, within days of their marriage, he was continuing to see, his old love, now Queen Camilla. And so it was really difficult for her, 10 times more difficult than for Meghan, because at least Meghan was aware that, Harry was in love with her, still is in love with her. So she had that sense of emotional solidity, which poor Diana didn't have. I mean, Diana knew almost from day one that Charles was only marrying her because of the pressure of the senior royals. In fact, actually, the unhappiness, the disaster of Diana's time in the royal family, that was one of the things that changed the royal family more perhaps than anything else. They realized how badly they'd got it wrong with Diana and how unhappy she was, which is why someone like Kate had she had a much easier ride. And I think Meghan would have had an easy ride, but she didn't like the formality, she didn't like the restrictions, and she wanted everyone, as we said, to be a bit warmer. And so I think there's a lot of conflict with those different things, and as you said, different expectations which need to be managed.
Well, you said in the book that Meghan was quoted as saying at one point, "What Diana started, I want to finish." So when I hear a quote like that, I think, and I believe that she wanted everybody to be a bit warmer. But why didn't she see it as an opportunity, if she really did want to start what Diana finished, as being the beacon, as being the one that is warm, that ultimately, had she stayed in the game, everybody would have inevitably been like, well, why is she so sweet and everyone else doesn't seem to be as sweet as she is? And I feel like it would have forced a movement towards different behavior. Although I will admit, in the last few years, I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do feel like I'm seeing Prince William and Catherine being much friendlier and much more engaging. Selfies, hugs at some of these engagements, which I would not have guessed I would have seen 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think they've learned in a way from Meghan, even though Meghan, bailed out. I think they realized that what she wanted to bring to the royal family would actually be really useful, which is why, as you say, they are now doing the kind of warm, huggy things that, when Meghan joined the royal family, they weren't doing. I think also that if Meghan had been patient and stayed for longer, been more diplomatic, she probably still wouldn't have been able to do, that phrase you use, to finish what Diana started. And the reason for that was that not being the future king and queen, Harry and Meghan would always have to do the kind of good deeds that were discussed and agreed by the royal machine. They couldn't just go and do the things they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it would have always been, okay, they can carry on doing the kind of good works that Diana did, but always playing second fiddle in that respect to Kate and William. And I think they just didn't like that restriction. It's the classic of the gilded cage. You have this wonderfully luxurious life, but you can't choose what to do. You can't choose which charities to support without first getting the agreement of the rest of the royal family. And I just think she felt that was ridiculous. Why should she be controlled in that way? But that's the way the royal family works. I mean, even down to the level of, if you're in Kensington Palace and you want to go to the hairdresser at 11 a.m. on a Saturday, you have to get permission, even if you're a senior royal, because you mustn't leave at the same time as another senior royal is leaving. So if Kate's going at 11 a.m. on Saturday to the hairdresser, then Meghan could not book to go to the hairdresser also at 11 a.m. Even if it was different hairdresser, they're not allowed to leave at the same time. So a lot of it seemed to Meghan very petty.
Yeah.
Why could she not make her own decisions about her own life? And I think that was one of the biggest things that she resisted. And the more she resisted the rules, the more the senior royals disliked what was going on and rejected her effectively.
Well, and Prince Harry wasn't going to be able to justify it because he didn't, it sounds like Prince Harry didn't really understand. Well, you go into the book that a lot of the rules can be silly, but they've existed for so long that Prince Harry probably doesn't know what the ultimate objective was in making that rule. So she's complaining to somebody that can't talk her down because he doesn't really understand why they're in place either.
Yeah, exactly. So all his years growing up in the royal family, he would have just accepted these rules without question, without thinking about them. And then Meghan comes along and quite rightly says, "Well, why are we doing all these petty things? Why can't we change them?" And as you say, Harry is saying, "I don't know. We've always done that. I'd never thought why we do it." But he very quickly moved over to accept most of Meghan's views about the sort of petty rules and regulations. And again, that caused friction.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when Meghan first was dating Harry, they went with some of Harry's school friends and army friends to a pheasant shoot, pheasant hunting, you'd call it, in England. And Meghan really disliked it. She disliked the views of some of the very reactionary views of some of Harry's friends. She disliked the formality of she thought it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was too easy. She just didn't like the whole atmosphere. And Harry agreed with her after that. Even though he'd grown up with this kind of tradition of pheasant shooting, he switched immediately. So the senior royals and some of the staff who were on William and Harry's side immediately thought of her as, I mean, many people think it's a positive word, but in the royal family, being woke is not, it's not seen as a positive.
Yeah, yeah.
It's seen as a criticism. People called her a tree hugger, and that wasn't meant as a nice comment. That was meant as a criticism, because she didn't like the traditional pursuits, the traditional hobbies and pastimes of the royal family. So not only did she not like the restrictive rules, she didn't even like the things that they did in their spare time, as it were.
Yeah.
And of course, Harry increasingly saw that Meghan's view was much more like the view of the rest of the world. And that meant he'd stepped outside the gilded cage. And of course, once he'd stepped outside, I think the rest of the royals decided to try and keep him outside.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I do. I feel a sense of sadness for him, though, because when I hear about things he's doing here in LA, it's very much Meghan's world, and I wonder how much that feeds his soul. Which is a very Meghan Markle thing of me to say, so I apologize. So that was a tree hugger comment if I've ever made one. But when I think about him in Santa Barbara at the book opening with Meghan and Oprah and some, the book opening, it was an agent. It's a maybe a literary agent that recently opened a book outside of Montecito, and Meghan spoke there, and Harry hanging out with these 40 to 60-year-old women primarily that Meghan loves and that are mentoring and advising Meghan in some way. But how much of that does Harry truly enjoy? I mean, does he ever miss laughing with his friends and going to estates with his friends and being in the middle of nowhere? Because while Montecito is nice and quiet, you're hearing car horns, you're hearing people lock their cars. It's not like being in the middle of nowhere with your best friends and the serenity you feel there and the zen and being around this group of people that you can trust and that don't judge you because you've been their friend since you were both babies or boys. I do wonder how much he misses that environment compared to the social life they have in Montecito today.
Well, somebody told me who's been with Meghan and Harry in the States said that he sometimes seems like a little boy lost, that he's trying to find things to do, but because he's not really trained to do anything other than be a royal and do what royals do, he's finding it really difficult. He gets up, he takes the dog for a walk, goes for a drive. He can't do the kind of things that Meghan, I don't think he wants to do. He doesn't really want to have a career, on the internet with the kind of things that Meghan with love, that kind of thing. He doesn't want to do that. Doesn't feel qualified to do that. And so he's really struggling to fill the time. He likes Meghan's friends and he mixes with them, but I think he always has the sense of, I'm not a person who has a role outside still being a royal. I'm just a royal in exile. And I think it's the tragedy of growing up as a senior royal is that by the time you get to adulthood, if you leave, you're not trained to do anything. I don't think he could change a light bulb. He couldn't fix a car. He can't do anything practical, and so life is really difficult for him. And I think you can see there's a certain amount of strain in the relationship because he's clearly still in love with Meghan, but it's that keeps him in the States. I think otherwise he would come back. If they were divorced, heaven forbid that should happen, but he would come back because there is nothing for him. He can't have a job as an actor. Meghan could go back to that. She's got her various projects, which Harry's on the edge of. And the thing that's really worrying him is that all the research in America suggests that people are losing interest in him. First it was the great romance for which he gave up being a member of the royal family, a bit like Edward VIII, who gave up the crown for Mrs. Simpson, another American. It had echoes of that great romance, but of course you can't live on that day to day years later. So I think Harry is struggling.
You when you describe him, it reminds me of watching. I've always had a soft spot, and I always kind of ache for veterans that struggle. And he's a veteran too. They struggle to come back to the real world and find the right place for them to contribute. And they struggle so much that a lot of them end up on the street, which is so horrible to see. But it's interesting that he's chosen the route of supporting veterans and having kind of so much in common with them, where he leaves this life where he's trained to do one thing and doesn't feel like he knows how to do anything else in the United States, really. When you talk about Harry and Meghan not being able to contribute, because that's a very important narrative that we heard when Harry and Meghan stepped down, was that they weren't able to contribute in the way, and they were never going to be able to contribute in the way that they wanted to in the British royal family and pursue the types of things that were important to them. They were always going to have to ask permission and make sure it wasn't something Catherine and William cared about doing before they were allowed to do it. Have you seen that reflected in their work today? What do they do today that they couldn't do? And I mean in the charity space. And if you don't know the answer, that's fine too. But today I look at their work and I think, well, Senabale existed. Now I know that he just stepped down, but Senabale existed within the royal family. Travelist started when he was still in the royal family. Invictus, African Parks Charity. I feel like the majority of the things he does today started when he was a member of the royal family. He hasn't really started anything new. And then Meghan has really gone completely commercial. So does that story hold up today, that they were held back in some way by the royal family? The way that they wanted to contribute to the world, they were held back.
I think they were held back. I mean, in the first instance, the major way in which they were held back, if you remember, there was the Sandringham Summit, as it was called, where there was a discussion between the senior royals and Meghan and Harry about their future. And that was where Meghan and Harry said, look, we want to be working royals for part of the year and not for another part of the year. And the royal family said, no, you're either fully in or you're fully out, and that was a major cause of the breach between the two sides of the family. But as you say, the charities that Harry especially wanted to be part of and to promote, and of course Meghan was fully behind that, were the sort of charities that Harry got involved with when he was a royal. Now, as I understand it, he has tried to become involved in other charities since leaving the royal family. But the problem is he's beginning to realize that charities are not so interested in him because he's not a working royal. I think he always felt that even outside the royal family, his value as a member of the royal family would remain the same, but actually it's declined because people are saying, well, you're not a working royal anymore, so it doesn't really count. And so when he's put out feelers about other charities, there hasn't been the response that he'd hoped for. And the charities that he's no longer sent to Bali, for example, that he's, there's been this big row, I think he will find it very difficult to move on from that and become involved in another charity or set up a charity such as Invictus. It all dates back to the period when he was in the royal family, and there hasn't been anything since, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also is making him feel very uncomfortable. I mean, it's a bit like the Shakespeare King Lear play. He gave up being a royal, but somehow thought that he could still behave in a way that a royal would behave. And he's only discovered when it's too late. That's his tragedy, that you can't do that. People are not as interested. And that will apply to the kind of things that he said and Meghan said they wanted to achieve, in the tradition of Harry's mother, Diana. So it is going to be increasingly difficult for Harry, even on the charity front.
That's so interesting because when this is unrelated to charity, but it was Harry's birthday last year, and I was doing a story about it, and I had a publicist pestering me, trying to get me to do a write-up on one of their celebrity clients. And somehow I found a way to combine these stories. And I said, well, why don't you give me a comment or give me some sort of spiel on Harry's birthday? And the publicist was like, we don't want anything to do with them. Like, we really, the brand is toxic. Nothing, we'll talk royals, but we don't want anything to do with Prince Harry. And that was one of the first times where I sat back and said, wow, there's been the divide in Hollywood. I instinctually felt like everybody was going to continue to associate them with the royal family and the proximity they had to the royal family. And that was really one of the first times that somebody was like, not him, but call us with royal stuff, and that really kind of caught me off guard. When you talk about Harry and Meghan, and Meghan's empathy, Meghan's kind of compassion, the California cuddles, does it surprise you at all that they pursued this kind of vengeful path? And if you think that word is too strong, correct me, but does it surprise you at all that they fought so fiercely against the royal family for the first few years after they left, knowing that the Queen was ill and that Prince Philip was ill? Because that is one of the comments I hear a lot in the States. People are angry that they feel like Harry and Meghan made the last few years of their lives uncomfortable.
Yes, people I've spoken to have said that there's a sense that Harry, more than Meghan, but Harry mostly, it was sort of selfish, given that Prince Philip and Elizabeth II were in the last stages of their life. It was selfish of him to stir up all this stuff, to be a rebel in a way, to break away from his family and cause all the sort of bad publicity. And I think, as you've hinted, it looked vengeful. It looked afterwards as if they were constantly criticizing the family when it couldn't have all been on one side. The fault nobody ever really believed that the royal family were horrible, were deliberately making Meghan and Harry unhappy. So it probably would have been better in terms of the brand, as you say, the publicity around them, if they'd stayed quiet, they'd refrained from criticizing the royal family. I mean, after all, that's one of the things that people always admired about the late Queen Elizabeth II, that she never complained and she never explained. Whereas Harry and Meghan have gone the other way. They keep making a fuss. They constant legal battles, attacks on some of the attacks really very public, very personal. And I think they've misread the situation. I think they felt the public would be sympathetic when they went on television, with Oprah and made all these criticisms. But actually, it's kind of blown up in their faces. What's actually happened is the opposite. For what they expected. That I think they expected sympathy, and actually they're not getting sympathy. And I think that's to do with the fact that Harry, a lot more than Meghan, is very naive. Again, it goes back to growing up in this very strange bubble, this gilded cage, doesn't equip you for making judgments about in the outside world. He's come to the outside world too late to learn instinctively how to behave. He still behaves in an entitled way, even when he's criticizing his own brother. So, I think, as you've hinted, it looks vengeful, and it hasn't done the brand of the Sussex brand any good at all.
I want to bring this up because in a previous conversation we had, I loved the comparison you did to Meghan and Diana, and how um, Diana grew up with this background to where she was kind. I mean, she was just simply nice to the people that worked around her. She'd show up to their house, kick her feet up, and play with the kids, play with the animals. But Meghan had a very different attitude towards staff. And I was reminded of this in your new book, because you say that Meghan didn't really like the fact that Harry tended to ask staff if they would mind tidying up or bringing something to him. And you said with her background, she felt when you pay people to do something, you just issue commands, and that Harry should just tell them what to do. And that, again, reminded me of this conversation we had about Meghan versus Diana. Could you go into that a little bit? And I mean, that to me is such a sweet reflection of Prince Harry, and I would hate for that to go away. And I wonder if by now he has changed his attitude towards the way he speaks to the people that they pay to help them.
I don't think he has. I think it is part of his charm, and I think now Meghan has accepted that that's the way he does things. I think it's developed this business of the royals saying to their staff, "Would you mind doing this or bringing that?" I think it developed because they were criticised so much, in the past, even as recently as the 1950s and 1960s, for being too imperious with their staff, for treating them almost as if they were pieces of furniture.
Yeah.
And so now they've gone the other way, because they want to deflect criticism of, we don't even use the word servants anymore. Well, certainly up to the 60s, the 1960s, they were all the staff were referred to as servants. So as part of that shift, that, if you like, democratization, the royals are very careful to seem very polite to the staff, to treat them as equals, really, even though, of course, they're not. It's just a form of, I mean, some people laugh at it, sort of, the way the English are supposed to. If someone bumps into you in the street in England and it's their fault, you always say sorry to them.
Always, I do the
Same
same
kind of
thing.
it's kind of overly polite. Yeah, lots of people do it. But I think in the royal family, that's one of the reasons why they've survived. In certain respects, they've adapted, they have changed, and they knew that as far as the staff are concerned, you've got to be nice to them. And I think, if anything, that's one of the things that Meghan has learned, is that, okay, it is a contractual relationship. You are paying the staff and they should do what you ask them to do. You need to treat them decently if they're going to do it without resentment. So if anything, from people I've spoken to, the shift has been the other way. Rather than Harry no longer saying, "Would you mind doing so and so?" Meghan tends to do that more now. But she didn't when she first joined the royal family. She tended to think, well, we're just paying them, they should just do it. We don't have to, we don't have to ask them politely. So there's been a shift there.
What did the source mean when they said Meghan should really have been employed in the palace kitchens? What do you think that the meaning behind that was? That she didn't realize all the hard work they were doing, or she was out of place? Do you remember that?
I'm afraid it was. Yes, I do. It was pure snobbery.
Oh.
You've got to remember that the royal family is still split into younger people who work in the comms teams, who do the who are maids and secretaries, and then there are the old people, the equerries, who tend to come from very similar backgrounds, very aristocratic, and their families often work for the royal family generation after generation, and they can be very, very snooty about people coming in. who are, they were like that about Kate. They were very rude about her background because she came from a very ordinary background. But Kate just kept quiet and accepted that eventually it would go away. And they did that with Meghan. That remark about Meghan should work in the kitchens was really to say, basically, if she was in England, she's a working class person, and therefore she should be in the kitchen. But only some of the staff, because it is a very interesting mix. You've got these aristocratic staff, and then you've got the ordinary staff. So the ordinary staff tended to like her because she, felt she was kind of just one of them almost. But the more aristocratic staff were, they were snobbish about her. She's not good enough. She's not an aristocrat, in other words. And so that tension is still there. Even now, it's still there.
Well, I could talk to you forever, but I will end on this question. I love this book, and I clearly enjoy talking to you because I think I asked you for half of the time that I've demanded of you today. So I'm so sorry. But
not at all, no.
I love the quote, "Meghan is Mrs. Simpson come back to haunt us." Can you expand on that quote from this book?
Yes, several people I spoke to who, in fact, one or two who were old enough to remember what happened with Mrs. Simpson, they said that it was an amazing repeat. It was like history repeating itself, and they were astonished. They said, how is it that this such an exact parallel could happen? That Edward VIII fell in love with an American woman and basically gave up the crown. And Harry, okay, he was never going to be king, but he's no longer really in the succession to the throne. I think people were just astonished that it could happen twice in a relatively short period. But then for historians, it's not so surprising because, at the turn of the 20th century, the 19th into the 20th century, dozens, I think even possibly hundreds of English aristocrats married wealthy American women because the American women, they got the title, and the impoverished English aristocrat, they got the money. So there was a tradition. But, I think a lot of people were amazed at history repeating itself, as perhaps, we always are. If something happens that's extraordinary, it's even more extraordinary if 50 years later, 60 years later, it happens again.
And do you feel like Harry and Meghan initially experienced the exile that Wallace and Edward did? Because I felt like the royal family could have been crueler. And now, I mean, I do feel like they're in exile now, but I don't think that they initially were. When remember, the Queen was like, well, why don't you take a year? Just take a temporary year. And it felt like once Harry and Meghan realized that the palace had determined that maybe they should, that the way things were going is the way that they should keep things, Harry and Meghan were devastated and reacted in the way that they did, meaning Oprah sit down and everything else that came with it.
I think the key difference was that Edward VIII was, I mean, it was much harder for him because he'd actually given up the crown.
Yes.
So, and I think, the Queen Mother never forgave him for that. And I think other senior royals felt that was a much bigger betrayal. Whereas as Harry, because he was never going to be king, although it upset a lot of people, it wasn't in the same league. It wasn't quite as terrible. And so when they left, I think if they kept quiet, if they hadn't criticized so much, I think then there would have been an approach, and maybe Harry would have been offered some kind of a role that would have utilized his experience and his status as a royal. But the more they shouted and screamed and kicked and threw stones at the royal family, the less likely that was to happen. And I think now we've reached a point really of no return. So although he didn't give up the crown, he's now in the position that Edward VIII was, where the royal family didn't want Edward VIII to come back to the UK even for a holiday.
Yeah.
They just didn't want to see him at all. They wanted him forgotten. And I think, Meghan and Harry is almost at the same point now, which is very sad.
Did you at all get a peek of Meghan's episode today, which is with the highbrow hippie co-founder? Did you see any of the headlines circulating about that?
Are there headlines circulating about
I
that?
mean,
Because I check
no.
the news every morning, first thing, and I saw no headlines about that.
You're like, is there did Meghan Markle breaking news, a new episode podcast drops? No, the headline circulating is her glorified explanation for why she became as ever and why she actually refers to American Riviera Orchard as word salad, which made me laugh because that's something we talk about all the time, how Meghan Markle is just full of it, is full of the
Hmm.
word salad. But it gives you this sense that Meghan is really trying to use this podcast as a vehicle to justify her historically bad judgment and rewrite history. But having her girlfriend on, the creator of Highbrow Hippie, a brand that I think both you and I have only ever heard of because of Meghan Markle
I've never heard of it, Kinsey.
at all, not even because of,
No.
oh wow. Well, I think to me it kind of justifies the stories that have been circulating that Meghan is having a really hard time booking A-list guests or booking anybody relevant for her podcast. Have you heard anything similar just through gossip? And then we'll read some of the quotes that insiders have been whispering about Meghan's difficulty to find legitimate podcast guests.
Well, I think it's just obvious. When Camp Montecito wants us to know something, they do leak it. They leak profusely, even though they want their privacy. So, the Occam's razor, sort of the simplest explanation is the most likely. Episode 1, I am sure her dream guest would have been Gwyneth Paltrow. That is a no-brainer. It's her neighbor in Montecito, one of the starriest of entrepreneurs. She's in that whole health and wellness and organic space. And I'm sure it was a no.
Yeah.
If she even got a response. And I'm trying to, I was thinking like Victoria Beckham, that's another one. You want the stars, you want to bring in the eyeballs and the ears and the listens and the likes. These people are clearly keeping a great distance from the toxicity. And when you look at the Netflix show, there is no you can see exactly why. You see how she treated Mindy Kaling
Mm-hmm.
in her fake kitchen, correcting her multiple times, sniping and microaggressing. Who would go near this?
Yeah, right. Okay, so what I love this line that insiders say Meghan Markle is raging that A-listers are keeping their distance. Raging is always a fun way to describe Meghan Markle. According to reports, the Duchess of Disappointment is facing an uphill battle in the general buzz for her new show, Confessions of a Female Founder. A media insider revealed she's dialed all the big names, like you said, likely calling people like Gwyneth. I imagine Jessica Alba, Kerry Washington, some of these people we've actually seen her vaguely engage with on social media, and no one's picking up the phone. And they also mentioned here there's no Taylor Swift, no Beyonce, not even Hailey Bieber. I feel like Hailey would do anything at this point to distract from the Justin headlines too. I feel like we might even see Hailey do that podcast if she were to be asked. When you're pitching female empowerment, that's a problem. It speaks volumes for her pulling power. She's not happy about her lack of appeal. It is a lack of appeal. And just to have a bunch of your friends on your podcast that just sit there and kiss your ass, that's not a good listening experience for anyone.
None of it has anything to do with founding an actual business. It's all about fluffing Megan's ego, which needs inflating and reinflating on the hour, every hour on the hour. I was just thinking as you were speaking, like who else could have been like kind of an easy get? Any one of the Kardashians? Sure, that was a no. Reese Witherspoon, I would love to hear
Reese
from
Witherspoon has said no. I know that Reese Witherspoon had told her no for archetypes
You
because she
do.
loves Catherine.
Amazing. That is a person who she sold the business she founded for like $1 billion. I love anybody who promotes reading as she does and has built a great brand on reading. That would be like so this is basically we are getting the baseline level of popularity among the A-list cohort that Meghan so desperately wants to belong to. And I think that's why we keep hearing her refer to herself as Duchess or I'm Sussex now. It's this kind of insistence to herself and to her four audience members that but she is important, she matters, she's
Yeah.
influential, and attention will be paid.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I just read former Vanity Fair editor Tina Brown has made some more amusing observations about Meghan Markle that I imagine we will agree with, accusing her of being enormously shallow and claiming the reason she's launching so many new business ventures is because she's desperate for attention. And that's kind of how I felt when I read Tom Bower's new quotes about this crisis that Harry and Meghan are in to stay relevant. I thought, well, no wonder we're seeing these panic launches all, in a row. It's Meghan you're sensing her anxiety. She's so fearful of becoming irrelevant. And that's basically what Tina Brown said. She said her problem is that she is so ADD. She just never stops making announcements and never really follows through. She said this on the Mixed Signals podcast. I'm like, I'm going to do a cooking show. Now I'm going to be a podcaster. Oh, look at my beauty line. The beauty line hasn't dropped yet, but I imagine it will. I imagine she will punish us with it one day. It's like, just do all of those things. Don't do all those things. Do one thing really well. She says that Meghan seems panic stricken in her business model. And I loved this quote. Maybe she's just so void of self-confidence that she's always trying to sort of become an instant Beyonce without the background that built her. She also said she's enormously shallow in her approach to the work that she does. What I hear from everyone is that she's unadvisable, and that is an issue. And she talks about how she does have a really important group of people around her, or did at one point, that were advising her and just got so fed up with Meghan sitting in front of them, acting incredibly motivated by the advice she was being given, and then running off and doing the complete opposite. And the point that Tina made that I thought was important, especially watching everything that's going on right now, is she said, unfortunately, Meghan is the major advisor to Harry. She doesn't take advice, and he only takes hers. I mean, that is a recipe for disaster. Do you agree with Tina? Do you not agree with Tina? I always get a kick out of what she says.
I love Tina Brown, and I could listen to her observations daily. I wish I could get access to that mind daily. I love it. Her book, The Palace Papers, was excellent. Um, I think, it's so funny that observation about like Meghan sort of panic throwing all of these launches out there and how it really is only meant to redound to her benefit, right? To make her feel important, relevant, a constant in the headlines really, really lands. And I don't know about you, but like just personally, in the run up to launching The Nerve, I really thought and relied very much on a team of people who know far better than I do. But it feels like everybody out there, like everyone's got a podcast, right? So what am I bringing to people that they're not getting anywhere else? I have to have a reason for existing. I have to have a reason. It better be a damn good one to ask people to spend their free time and attention on my show. And I don't think Meghan thinks about her consumers that way.
Oh.
I don't think she thinks about them at all, frankly. I think she just throws it. Confessions of a Female Founder, again, Kinsey, I love this name, right? And when in her intro to the show, she's talking about, oh, being a founder can be so overwhelming, so overwhelming. And then she goes, woo, like it's the most artificial sigh of exhaustion and excitement I've ever heard. It explains why she really is, was, and remains at heart a suitcase girl.
Yeah, the Hallmark actress, which is actually an insult to Hallmark actors. I love the Hallmark Channel. But that sigh you just did, I immediately flashed back to the duck video that she released around Easter of the baby ducks. Did you have the unfortunate?
Yes, it was in my algorithm, sadly. Yeah.
I mean, how over the top and obnoxious is that? It's baby ducks. Hell yeah, I love baby ducks. But why do we have to see your reaction to baby ducks? Why can't you just show us the baby ducks and your over the top reaction to the baby ducks?
That was my exact thought too. In her perfect white outfit, I'm going to say base price $1,000, with her hand like this, like, ooh, ooh, baby duck. Look at me. I'm so whimsical. I'm just like a Montecito mama. I'm having this whimsical reaction to nature in my, like, the whole thing felt staged. I feel like those ducks were professionals. She hired them out. We did some dry runs.
Central casting provided the ducks.
Who provided the ducks? Exactly.
I mean, you're a 45-year-old woman. You've seen baby ducks before.
Yeah, we've all been in nature. We've all been to zoos, but it's Easter, I guess. It's a time of renewal. Meghan loves to remind us of her maternal warmth, which again is another thing she's slinging and selling out on the open marketplace. And I, for one, do not buy it. I don't think oh, the Kinsey, the anecdote she told, was it on episode 2? Again, I only listened to clips, but she was talking about how motherhood is her absolute favorite thing. And she can't bear to be away from her children for a single second, even in another room. She can't bear. So when she goes into another room, she has to get her phone out and start scrolling through all the pictures of her children who are just next door so she can get her fix. And then Harry comes in, and in her telling, I swear to God, this is like a verbatim quote. In her telling, Harry comes in and he goes, "My love, can't you just take care of yourself for a moment?
Oh
Won't
my
you go
God.
work out or take a bath?" Who talks like this, Kinsey? Who talks like this?
Oh my gosh. Those two are they're the most selfish people I've ever encountered in my entire life. I highly doubt that Meghan sacrifices Meghan has taken plenty of me time over the last 5 years. We saw it firsthand. That's wild to me that she puts that stuff out there. It's just, I guess it's her kind of like how we talk and about the way that Michelle Obama tries to drop these little hints that everything's fine at home with her and BO in her
Mhm.
podcast. It's maybe that's Meghan attempting to do the same thing, especially when she's sitting on the. Did I tell you that I found out that the Drew Barrymore encounter was entirely staged? Like Meghan's team had all of the questions beforehand.
No.
Meghan knew she was going to be asked about Prince Harry. She had that story prepared about always dating. She knew Drew was going to bring out the picture of Princess Diana. And I actually defended her and said, well, I'm glad that she didn't like really lean into the Princess Diana thing. She seemed to be gracious and move on. Well, now I take it all back, because now we know that every second of that was staged and approved by Markle's team.
Authenticity, Kinsey.
Yeah, she's super
Nothing
good
says
at it.
authenticity like pre-rehearsed questions and answers with Drew Barrymore, who is like she if you can say about Drew this, she is only incredibly sweet and loving and flattering to all of her guests. Her goal is to make you look good. So if you need freaking cue cards to hack a Drew Barrymore appearance, you are in real trouble and you have not an authentic bone in your body. And to the Princess Diana moment, which I
Mm,
saw in real time, I thought this was an incredibly sweet moment on Drew's part, where she's bringing out this photo of herself as a small child, like 7 years old at an ET premiere, handing a little stuffed animal to a very young Princess Diana. Now, if I'm Meghan Markle, which thank God I'm not,
yeah, thank God.
uh,
We wouldn't
I
be
would
friends.
say, I would say to Drew Barrymore, oh my God, what a moment in your life. You
Mm,
have had a life like no other. Tell me what that moment was like for you. Tell me what meeting Diana was like for you. But she couldn't do it. She had to dismiss Drew as a mere fangirl. We're talking child Drew at
yeah,
7. She goes,
yeah,
oh, how sweet. How sweet.
yeah,
I'll have to tell H about this. I'll have to just tell him. As if so she's levitating out of that conversation now. She's
yeah.
no longer on terra firma with the rest of us. She's talking about H, not Harry, who presumably one would think is watching this show and cheering his wife on during her big launch and getting an A-list media hit that most people would kill for, which is going to presumably move some merchandise. Oh, I'll just have to tell him. Oh, you're so sweet. This is why people hate her.
Yeah.
She cannot level down. I
Well,
can't
it's one of the
stand her.
many
I'm sorry for
reasons. It's one
swearing,
of the
but
many reasons why people dislike her. Well, speaking of which, despite failing to make Time 100's most influential this year, she's invited herself to the summit. She's invited herself to speak at the event, which I just think is horrific. Like, I think that's so embarrassing. You didn't make the list, but you're going to show up to talk. Um, First of all, I have to ask, does it say anything to you about this, the existence of this list, that Blake Lively made it? It's one of Time's most 100 influential.
Blake Lively clearly laid down some cash for some cause that she was going to have this boomerang back to her when she needs it.
Well,
Again,
it was NAACP, which makes me laugh because she is the woman that had her wedding at a plantation.
right. And wasn't her whole brand that also flopped hard? It was sort of rooted in that sort of plantation-y,
Yeah,
like,
the blog, the lifestyle site. Is
yeah,
that
and
what
then
you're
she
talking
was
about?
selling stuff. She was trying to be Gwyneth.
Yeah.
It didn't work. Again, she's highly unlikable. And there are a lot of parallels there between, like, if I'm Blake Lively, I'm just going to ground. Just don't show your face. Just let this ride itself out as much as you possibly can. Meghan has no shame. So, she was in New York about a week ago. Privacy, privacy, privacy. She showed up to a Broadway show with a caravan of 4 security cars. Taylor Swift and Beyonce use 2 at most, okay? Presidents and ex-presidents use less. But we have to alert the media to our presence. We're on Broadway. So she's going to probably roll up with like a ridiculous, grotesque caravan that's going to clog traffic up in New York. If her previous remarks are anything to go by, and remember, I gutted it out. I took one for all of you guys. I went to that Ms. Magazine event where she was given some meaningless award and had to listen to her word salad.
You did.
And it was god awful. What is she going to say? Like, if you could just like spitball, like, what do you think her message is going to be to this room full of, let's remove Blake Lively from this equation, but otherwise, like, influential people who are moving the needle in the culture? What is Meghan Markle going to tell them?
Nothing of value, and that's what frustrates me so much is they're calling her like the founder of as ever or whatever. I can't remember how Markle, who's
Oh,
just
it's founder as ever and actress, producer. It's like Mindy Kaling's Chiron on her show.
exactly.
Actress, producer, friend.
Yeah, founder of As Ever, actor, producer, and I'm like, As Ever, hasn't even had its first birthday yet. I mean, did you ever even receive your honey? I mean, some customers haven't ever even received like their purchase yet, and what can she say on a stage that's going to inspire Elon? What in God's green earth could she say? It's just it's so infuriating to watch these two fail, Harry and Meghan fail up. That when is somebody going to say, tell them no, you don't belong here. You didn't deserve it. You don't deserve it. You didn't earn it.
I wonder if it's kind of just like camp at this point, right? Like, maybe it's like, oh, let's see, like, they're going to bring eyeballs to this event.
Yeah,
So,
that's it. That's
so
it.
that's it. But when you were saying that, I was thinking, like, do you think Meghan looked at that ridiculous let them eat cake 11-minute joyride in space that Gayle King, who has become peak insufferable Gayle King,
Yeah.
and Katy Perry and Lauren Sanchez, and then 3 other people whose names we don't know because they're not fame whores. Do you think she looked at that and said, where was my invite?
100. I thought that a million times as I was watching this. And you know what? You're right. And it bothers me that we don't know their names of the other women because one of the women, and it kills me that I've already forgotten her name, but one of the women wanted to be an astronaut and was brutally had to spend like $5,000 on a kit, and had to through the process of having this investigated. The kit was allegedly destroyed and they never found out who attacked her. And because she was so depressed, she went dark for a while and tried to process it, and then she became an advocate. And now she's actually going back into what she was initially passionate about, which is space, and which is so that is the story we should have all been talking about, not Katy Perry and the Daisy, not Gayle King shaking the bell and so. But 100% do I believe that Meghan Markle was like, why was I not there? And Meghan specifically tried to worm her way in with Jeff and Lauren at the second Beyonce concert, the second night she went to Beyonce. So we've seen her hanging around them. We've seen her hanging around Kris Jenner. This is certainly a club that she is trying to insert herself in. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. When I was watching that, I thought Meghan Markle would have done that in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, the first royal in space.
Oh,
Wait,
God.
the first biracial royal in space. How many firsts can we get up there, right? that's so funny about Jeff and Lauren Sanchez. So now I'm thinking, okay, Lauren made herself BFFs with Kris Jenner, which I mean tells you everything about this woman's priorities, whatever. But like Kris Jenner invites almost everybody to her annual Christmas party. Harry and Meghan's invite seems to be getting lost in the mail constantly. And I really think they set the tone and put their foot epically wrong when freshly out of Megxit, and they went to that premiere, and Harry went up to Bob Iger, head of Disney, and said, "You know, my wife does voiceover work," and you can see Bob Iger's wife, her face. She's like, "What the actual F is happening?
Yeah, this is not the
This guy's
time.
asking my husband for work at a premiere, and like Jay-Z and Beyonce are right next to him." It was like the gall, just the unmitigated like uncouthness of everything, the grabbiness and the grubbiness. It's like they are just so like it's just me, me, me. What can you do for me? They can't even play the game. Like it's
No.
a transactional town. Learn how to play the game a little bit. Hire a professional like coach to help you socialize. I think clearly Harry was never properly socialized.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah.
And his wife, I mean, whatever toxic stew brewed up this particular brand of malignant narcissism, which is only going to get worse, not better.
Yeah.
I mean, you could study this in like psychology 101 for days, what created this kind of monster.
I did read a few years ago that right before Meghan met Prince Harry, she met with a publicist in London, and one of her get famous quick ideas over there was to do theater, like to be the celebrity that they cast for, you know, as Roxy Hart, or you know how they'll randomly throw a celebrity in a role. Do you think that might be what she's trying to do? Do you think it was just a sweet little Broadway visit, or do you think that's another one of Meghan's PR, you know, strategies that she's like, maybe I could do Broadway? I don't know. I think it's probably too much work for her at this point, but I do see that she's digging back into the 2014, 2015 strategy a lot lately when it comes to, you know, her professional path.
You know, I think you're right that Broadway would be too much for her because the level of discipline it takes, to do 8 shows a week, and just the way you have to keep your body in like peak physical condition just to have the stamina. I mean, I recently saw Nicole Scherzinger, if I'm saying her name right, in Sunset Boulevard.
Oh yeah.
That is like an athletic performance. It is a power. She's incredible. And someone like Meghan Markle, she's not going to be able to hack that. She wants to swoop in to a recording studio and do a podcast with quote unquote friends of hers. And she's clearly done no prep work for it because listening to this thing is the audio equivalent or the audible equivalent of watching paint dry. You're like, what is the actual, like the conversation is just formless. There's nothing. There's just lots of California verbiage, right? It's like intentionality and making space and permission structures to love yourself and, really just recognizing and acknowledging in yourself that working hard is really enough. And it doesn't really matter if you execute successfully, right? But just love yourself for working hard enough. And to which I say, it actually does matter greatly if you execute successfully, Meghan, because you're seeing the result when you don't. You will have the head of Spotify call you and your husband effing grifters because you did no work on podcast version 1.
Yeah. Did you see that? Well, no, because you didn't know that you haven't seen the comments yet. The comments around episode 3 are that we didn't find out about any of her physical ailments, that she didn't go into any of her medical history. And so the audience is like, oh my gosh, are you sure you're okay? Because we didn't hear about something that happened to you in the past. Isn't that a little odd that we're finding out so much medical information about Meghan Markle on the Confessions of a Female Founder podcast about how to become a billionaire?
It's so funny you say that, Kinsey. That's such a smart observation. We are missing a gynecological update on Meghan Markle's reproductive system. What will I do with myself? I don't know. I need the update. I cannot go on with my day without this most personal, again, I would like my privacy. And I fled the British royal family because they were demanding I give too much of myself. But I'm going to slap my ass down in a podcast chair and tell a bunch of strangers about my gynecological issues. It's
Oh my
so
God.
classy and on brand.
Um, what do you think about Meghan in August, just a few days shy of her 44th birthday? I doubt she'll actually physically be there, but having to revisit this case she tried to dismiss so many times, this libel case her sister has brought against her, because Harry and Meghan, according to Samantha Markle, Meghan's half sister, Meghan and Harry build the case in their Netflix docuseries that her sister is a part of some hate group that has brought her down and bullied her. And in response, Samantha Markle says, "I have received horrible attention. You've jeopardized my livelihood professionally, and I've been harassed immensely over the years because of the Oprah Winfrey interview and because of your Netflix series." Now, the case was initially dismissed. This is the appeal. And if things go right for Samantha, it's going to make life for Meghan much more difficult. But do you have an opinion on all of this chaos? I do sympathize with Meghan's family over some of the hate that they receive for speaking out against her. But in Samantha's case specifically, you do see that case built against Samantha in the show about how she's a part, she has all these, they claim she has all these various Twitter pages and she's harassing Meghan on Twitter, and she's saying that's legitimately not true, and the proof you're offering doesn't exist.
So Megan's saying that Samantha is part of a hate group. This is classic out of her toolbox. It's adjacent to racism, right? What other kind of hate group would her white sister, half sister, belong to? Okay. So again, that to me says this case has a lot of legitimacy because, by the way, nothing but greater for these two who are so litigious. They will sue over a poorly chosen word. They will freaking sue your ass into oblivion. I love that Meghan Markle is being tied up financially, psychologically, emotionally in this lawsuit that her sister won't drop. And I love that it's keeping Samantha and Thomas, two of what Meghan Markle clearly thinks are like the hobbits of her family, like the unsightly hobbits. So she had to cut them off, because we have to present perfectly at all times.
White dress, ducks.
White dress, ducks, ball gowns, sedated dogs. Just my opinion, and I think that dog was sedated on the Netflix show. Because dogs in kitchens typically aren't that calm. They're around
Right.
food
Yeah.
and they have smells. They can smell like 10,000 times greater than we do. So
Mhm.
I think that dog, again. So yeah, I love this for her. I hope it goes to trial. I hope she has to pay Samantha a lot of money to make this go away, which is probably the preferred outcome, but I love it.
Why doesn't she just pay her money to make it go away? Why is she, just does she really think that she has the upper hand? There was one line that I pulled about her attorneys, Meghan's attorneys say that they said in their past filing an implicit or express statement that Samantha belongs to a hate group spreading disinformation about Meghan is an opinion protected by the First Amendment. The same First Amendment that Harry says is bonkers. But isn't that wild that you can accuse your sibling of something, in this case, so heinous? Because you're right, there are elements of racism there. It not only is this woman harassed every single day because of her affiliation to Meghan Markle, and Meghan's version of events, but she says, I have lost professional opportunities because of this.
Meghan is she's just the worst. She's just the freaking worst. And I do think she will never pay Samantha money to make this go away unless and until it really becomes far too problematic for her, because really what this also does for Meghan is it gives her that supply that she loves, which feeds the victimhood slash martyr narrative. Oh my God, even my own blood is coming after me just because I'm so great.
I'm so
What am I to
popular.
do? Hide my greatness so that my sibling doesn't like come after me in a lot like that's her freaking weird, perverse, self-deluded thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I think that's what's animating her. So I think she's kind of probably getting off on it.
It was a quiet Easter when it came to the Prince and Princess of Wales. Tongues were wagging primarily over the fact that it was Prince Andrew and Fergie that attended church with King Charles and Queen Camilla at Windsor. But we didn't hear anything about what Prince William and Catherine were up to. The real story being that their lack of presence was felt. First of all, I guess I'd say, do you have an opinion on Prince Andrew being there? Do you think that should be the story that it's become? And then we'll kind of get into Prince William and Catherine.
Whenever he's seen in public with the family, when it comes to Prince Andrew, there's always going to be a degree of fascination. Now, this is a family get together. Now, he is still in the family. And bearing in mind, he had his ex-wife, or they lived together. And as she said, it's the happiest divorced couple that's ever been out there. But then they also had their children there as well. So it's a family affair. Because not only that, we saw Prince Edward, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. We saw Princess Anne and her husband. So it was a family get together for Easter. So nothing unusual about that. We just have to somehow just move away. What I suppose gets irritating is when people see him grinning and looking like the cat that's got the cream and that he's back on the royal stage. That's not the point. They're going to celebrate one of the holy days in the Christian calendar. They get together as a family with the king in his role as head of the Anglican Church. That is an important occasion. So I'm not going to read too much of it, but inevitably, whenever he is in town, in a sort of semi-private stroke public occasion like that was, people are always going to focus on him being brought back into the fold. But no, it's only a temporary return to public viewing.
I feel like I'm always the loudest person to say you are who you associate with, and that the king needs to be careful because Prince Andrew is so problematic in my eyes. But the reality is he's never been found guilty by a jury or a judge of anything that he's been accused of. And we also have to acknowledge that, like, if you are dealing with stuff or if you're not on the right path, isn't the best place to be church? Isn't the best place or isn't the best thing to be doing it chasing God, chasing faith? So I totally understand both arguments, but at the end of the day, I would say maybe church is the only place he should be right now. Maybe we should be celebrating the fact that he's right where he's supposed to be.
Well, yes, I think it is right that he goes to church. He's still involved in the family. I'm sure, every headline's about him linked with various Chinese organizations and everything just creates the odd headache for the king and the rest of the family. But in that occasion, it was a family affair and, with all the other members. So I think you have to rise above it and just say it's good that he's going to church and seen going to church. And just take up your theme, presumably asking for forgiveness somewhere along the line.
Do we have any idea where Prince William and Catherine were today? I mean, we're recording this on Easter, by the way.
Yeah, well, I have to say, we believe they were at Amner Hall because they're completing. I imagine the children will go back to school soon, and it's the end. They've obviously been skiing. We obviously saw William and George back at the football on Tuesday night when my team won epically 3-2, but still got booted out of the Champions League. And they had a great night. We all had a great night. So he went to that. But the point it being is, now, I do not know for a fact whether he did or didn't go to church. But I'm just going to put it out there in terms of his constitutional role. He is the future head of the Anglican Church, as the king is now. That will become one of his duties. Would it have not been possible, you know, just like we saw the King and the Queen and other members of the royal family at Windsor Castle, when you think back to Christmas, Kinsey, we all see them trolling off to Sandringham Church. You know, lots of people come along, go along. Just even a quiet photograph of him going to church with his family, maybe, without making song and dance of it, you know, maybe after the occasional something. Now, there may be, after we see something, that he may have gone. But I do think he, you know, sometimes if he's with his family, going to church is a family affair, just as we saw the rest of the family doing. Would it not be just to put something out there? We don't, maybe the Princess of Wales, she doesn't have to go, but perhaps, no, he goes to Aston Villa, right? And we see him there, and that's private. But what about going and just doing something that has a constitutional relevance? Just going, while enjoying a holiday, just taking time out for an Easter morning service to be seen at. Now, he may have gone, and I may have got it wrong, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. But I just think it is something that occasionally, within the family confines, going to church might have been seen as a good signal that, I'm not the rest of the family, but here I am fulfilling some of my obligations as the future king.
Do you think ever that he's trying to take advantage of every second he's not king?
I don't blame him,
Mm-hmm.
but he's got to be, you know, he's got to be eased into the role. And yes, once you become king, then your private time is very precious. And I know with his children at that still very young age, you know, and changing school time, you know, they're still, you know, approaching their teenage years and all that. So I can understand, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, there would have been lots of families who would have been taking their time out today to go to church on Easter Sunday. And maybe if you're the future head of that church, perhaps you should have gone. Now, as I say, he may have gone and they just didn't have any photographs. But as I say, that it wouldn't have probably been too difficult just to put something out on social media with a quick picture of them going into the local church.
Yeah, just I understand what you're saying. I do get the sense, though, that he's like, I'm not going to do anything until I absolutely have to, because I just want my freedom. I want every second of it.
I'm being, in a way, but he still has a job.
Yeah.
And his job is the future king.
You're right.
Now, it's great that he's doing Earthshot, and obviously we may come on to the fact that Jason Knopf has been appointed in charge of Earthshot. That's an interesting appointment, and he's got lots of things that he's involved in. So he has plenty of responsibilities, but this is the juggling act of his family and his job, which, okay, he is born into his job, one of Harry's beef, you know, he has no choice, but he's got to just sometimes, maybe occasionally just see if there's something that you can do to just get the balance maybe seen to be right. I may be overreacting, overthinking it, but I absolutely agree with him. He does need to make sure he has every opportunity of enjoying maximum parenting time with his children, but he also has a job like so many other people out there, of course.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Jason Knopf. Let me ask you about that really quickly. Has been promoted. So we know that the person that he's replacing had been in, I believe it was a female, her position for about 6 years, leaving on good terms. I received an email from an outlet that I have beef with because they reported that Meghan Markle sent the king a jam basket, and I said that's absolutely not true, and they reported it anyway, and then everybody else reported it, even though I said this is not true, this is not accurate. So that same outlet messaged me asking me about this Jason Knopf promotion and trying to stir the pot with Harry and Meghan, and I said, you know what, I just think that this guy is truly great at his job, clearly has proven himself to be a loyal individual, and this has nothing to do with taking on Harry and Meghan. When you give this guy a different job title, I think it's just like, I enjoy working with this person. There's a great rapport here. Promotion. I trust you.
Yeah, and this role is something that William values more than the homelessness and Earthshot are his two big projects, and he needs a big hitter to help him run it. And he is in royal terms, a big hitter. He's, very experienced, obviously. And I think the most important point is, William and he get on extremely well. Otherwise, he wouldn't be having the job, because he's got to trust this person to carry out his vision. And presumably, Jason Kanoff has been working with the king on this anyway and helping him of the
Future king.
communication of. Yeah, the future king. Yep, sorry, we got a bit ahead of ourselves, but the future king working on this. So, yeah, we don't want to send alarm bells out. Anyway, no. But most importantly, I think it is a very sensible appointment. But of course, it's easy to look into and say, well, this is, the person who brought out the bullying allegations. He knows what's been going on, but he's loyal to William and will continue to be incredibly loyal. And Earshot will benefit from his expertise. And the previous incumbent, she did a great job. And after 6 years, she probably feels it's time to move on, not necessarily completely to pastures news, but to go and do something different. Completely normal. There's no feeling that there was something controversial going on in the background.
Right. And you don't see the churn that you see with Harry and Meghan's charities and charity employees. Speaking of which, I didn't see a lot of chatter about this. And that surprised me, although the news cycle has moved so quickly that maybe people just don't want to discuss Senabale anymore. But a man claiming to be Senabale co-founder Prince Siso's brother blasted Prince Harry for not visiting Lesotho more often in recent years. He told The Telegraph on Wednesday, when Senabale was launched, I remember his words quite vividly, because he was very strong in saying, my mother, this place, her passion about Africa and all that. He's a loved figure because of his openness, but his loss of interest has totally killed the spirit of the Senabale charity, of their survival. He continued, I haven't seen Harry since he got himself married, which is a pretty savage. I think that's what led to the headline, specifically, Prince Harry lost interest in Senabale charity after marrying Meghan Markle, which is a pretty bold headline. They talk about how Prince Harry's most recent visit was in October of 2024. And we know that Dr. Sophie Chandaka specifically requested that. And then he also said that he was perturbed to see Harry and Meghan visit Africa after they got together in 2016 without stopping to visit the charity. That's pretty damning to have this coming from the brother of the co-founder.
Well, it isn't part of the allegation that why she wanted to move, Dr. Sophie wanted to move everything within Africa, is it's an African charity, but has felt that Prince Harry has, by leaving the royal family, has had an impact on the Senabale charity's ability to raise funds, because of they're no longer in the royal family. The sort of mudslinging that has been coming out from them over the years has created problems for their image and people wanting to associate with them. So it adds, obviously, you would trust the Telegraph presumably to have got it right. You can't suddenly start quoting to the extent that this person was quoted if that's what he didn't feel. And you do look that Harry has not been going to Africa like he used to. He does feel like he's sort of changed and wants to only concentrate on raising money when it's about polo, which is about as tone deaf as it possibly can be when it comes to trying to look like you're trying to help. It has a sort of imperialist overthrow that polo, is a sort of white man's playing thing. And look at us, we're doing a great thing for the people of Africa, which is a throwback to days gone by. So it is something, if it was done properly, then yes, but you felt that even with the polo, that was a sort of undercurrent of PR opportunities. And we've seen, the allegations that Meghan wanted Harry insisted on some sort of PR apology for Meghan from Dr. Sophie Chandaka, which led to the breakdown of relationship. It's unseemly. That's the problem. And what you're getting from that guy is further evidence of an unseemly breakdown of relations, which has had a serious impact on the Senabale charity and presumably its ability to raise funds.
Well, you're right. Dr. Sophie specifically says that she struggled in fundraising because people had questions about Prince Harry. They would immediately start asking about his status as a royal and some of the recent headlines. involving him, which is typically drama related. But I also wonder if it's a struggle to fundraise and using Prince Harry's association with the charity when he hasn't been around for years. So if I'm trying to get you to write a huge check because Prince Harry is associated, are you not looking at the documentation going, but Prince Harry hasn't visited here in 5 years? So technically I'm not really as associated with, so there's two options here. Either his brand is so toxic, which he does say his brand had become toxic, or you do want to associate with Prince Harry, but there is a real lack of emotional investment. Perception is there's a real lack of emotional investment from Prince Harry when he hasn't visited since he married Meghan Markle and ran off to the United States.
I absolutely agree with that, because one of the things is, if you're going to give money, the royal family have to know they have to sort of turn up and do the glad handing.
Yeah.
And if it's going to be his charity, you want heavy hitters, they want to be seen with you. And if it means, right, let's go and show the good work we're doing, you've got to get down and out there and be seen to be out there. And those trips have been conspicuous now by their rarity. And that is the problem for Harry. He does, these charity, yes, he goes to the Invictus Games for every 2 years, and he may be working behind the scenes to make sure that the next one is going to be very relevant. But at the same time, you actually think, if you're going to ask someone to cough up an awful lot of money, a big corporate, and say, support me, then you have to put the time in and be seen. And I'm not sure turning up to a polo match to raise money amongst your friends is not the way, and not necessarily the way that Dr. Sophie Chandorka sees the charity going. So it's all adding, and obviously it'll all come out in the wash in due course, that Harry has made a few missteps when it comes to this charity, and it must be very frustrating for all and sundry. But as I say, we may get news of the results in due course, but our reading so far suggests it's not all gone the way that Harry and Meghan would have liked.
Well, somebody that is going to agree with you there is Tom Bauer, and it sounds like we can look forward to new material from the royal author soon. Now, he says Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are in a crisis as she has not achieved the status she craves, which is something you've said. You've worded it differently, but we've certainly had a similar discussion on this program. Bauer alleges that the duo are constantly fighting for themselves, describing them as relentless. I use that word quite often when talking about Meghan Markle, and restless. I feel like that's a great word to describe these two. So sometimes when I look at everything they're trying to do all at once, especially in 2025, restless and relentless is certainly two words that I would use, but also this anxiety. It feels like this anxiousness, like fame is fleeting. They see that the fame is fleeting, so they've got to throw everything out there all at once. Now, Bauer says that Prince Harry doesn't understand where Meghan's coming from, which is that she worked phenomenally hard, struggled hard, and was constantly humiliated, and wants the security of finance and status. She hasn't got the status she craves. She hasn't got the pulling power. He's stuck in California, clinging on to his royal status, as is she. Isn't that the truth? Bauer claimed reconciliation between Harry and his family was totally unrealistic, saying that there is a zero chance of reconciliation because Prince William and Catherine are so angry about what's taken place over the last few years. He also alleges that while the pair have been wounded, Harry and Meghan, they continue to fight back with their desire for survival continuing to grow. A lot of some of the kind of comments we've made on this program. Did any of those statements, do you agree or disagree with any of those statements?
I think she's absolutely entitled to work as hard from raising money. It's just, unfortunately, the way she's going about it, it's given it a tacky feel because of her insatiable desire to suddenly become a billionaire celebrity, raising masses of money. And actually it becomes quite interesting. Again, we sort of alluded to it, the sort of crossroads with Harry feeling what's he doing? He's sitting out in California, um, wanting to, living off a royal title. But what's he doing? Has he got something that is getting him really going and motivating him? Whereas, you can, whether we like her podcast, like her program, at least she's busy.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't fault her for being busy, just none of it's particularly good. Um, well, second podcast was certainly right up there. Same old, same old. Talk about me again. And then we also, the TV program and making money out of Shop Me and all this stuff. Absolutely entitled to it. But it's that what he's really implying is the sort of desperate, almost fanatical need for this constant affirmation of just how brilliant she is. And actually, at the moment, she needs to take stock and say, well, everything, I'm doing all this stuff and I've been given the opportunity, but is it any good? But trouble is, no one can tell her
Mm-hmm.
because she thinks she's an absolute genius.
Right.
And Harry's none the wiser.
Right.
And he's obviously blind, love is blind. And as a result, she's ploughing her furrow, and he's sort of, I don't know whether he's twiddling his thumbs, but he's just angry and bitter. They've now been married nearly 7 years. We approach what we term the 7-year itch. So, obviously they've been through a lot. And if you look at the 7 years, I mean, it's not been dull.
No.
But it's just left him now friendless. And yet his wife is
And
trying to
familyless. Don't forget familyless.
Familyless. Familyless, friendless. That's the problem for him. Meghan's got a rich circle of Uber friends,
Hang-ons.
doing fawning at the feet of the Duchess. But Tom Bower is probably right. We've what he's saying is not actually new. It just sort of crystallizes it. I think would be the best way of describing it. We know that from an early age, Meghan has wanted fame. End of. And she's got it, but she's actually having to scramble away in a sort of tacky commercial way and not doing it, in my opinion.
Can I tell you what I think? I think that she achieved fame, and it was the palace's portrait of her. And the palace did an excellent job of painting her as this exquisite, hardworking, sweet girl that came to the rescue of Prince Harry, the third wheel. And the palace painted her as this delicate, smart, ambitious young woman. And then the truth came out, and the palace stopped protecting them. And so she was fighting this narrative that she would argue the palace created, but I don't even think she would give the palace the credit for the initial fame that they helped bolster, that they helped to bolster. Like, the only reason we liked her to begin with was because the palace said, look at this gorgeous girl on Prince Harry's arm, we all approve. And then we were like, oh, okay, we approve too. It was all done with whispers. It was all done with sources say that the king is smitten, Prince Charles is smitten with Harry's new girl. It was like little lines like that. Kate Middleton loves Prince Harry's new girl. It was just, 1 or 2 sentences from anonymous sources. But all of that stuff was heavily orchestrated to ensure that we accepted Meghan into the fold. And then Meghan's true colors started coming out because she did not read the room, and she just started to behave as herself. And I think that she and Harry tell the public that the palace created this negative narrative, when in reality, I think the palace overdid the charm. There was an overkill of how wonderful she was. And now we see who she really is. And so this chaotic anxiousness of like verbally vomiting and telling us all about herself is because she finally feels like it's her turn to tell us who she is. But we've seen too many different versions and we don't like most of them, so we've checked out.
Well, I mean, when she came onto the scene, everyone thought happy days for Harry. He's got something, found somebody who's got an interesting backstory. But unfortunately, as soon as she moved into the fold, she realized that this is in her world, a very constricting environment, and didn't like the protocols of the way you behave. You go back to the Easter Sunday, you can see exactly how everyone, even that service on Easter Sunday, there was a structure to it. Where you stood, how you went into the church, when you probably exited, everything, in a public viewing for the royal family is staged, and you don't go outside that royal protocol. For Meghan, that was a step too far, because what she wanted was to be standing next to the Queen going, look how wonderful I am. But actually, in reality, the people standing next to the Queen had to be the Princess of Wales, the Prince of Wales, the King, and the now King and Queen, whereas you are just down the pecking order. Mm-hmm. And so now she's got the wheels have, well, not come off, but now she's not burdened by that, but she's still living off it. And this is every time, it just irritates the heck out of me, that without her title, these doors would not be opening. If she'd stayed in suits and hadn't married Harry, presumably her Instagram stuff and everything would have been flying. I don't know. And she
I don't think so, because I don't think she's evolved with it. Maybe you're right. Maybe she would have evolved with it, but so many of the social media experts that are commenting on her current activity are like, she is stuck in 2014. She is stuck in 2015. I just refuse to fully engage in it, because I am busy talking to you almost several times a week. But the real success in social media right now is talking to your phone like this, walking around, just talking to your phone without makeup on, not chaos in the background, cars honking, like it's raw, it's real. And Meghan is too glossy and too polished. She was being written off Suits when she started dating Prince Harry. So she was about to be in the unemployment line. You're right. Prince Harry, she hit the jackpot with Prince Harry.
That was her lottery win in one. And now it hasn't worked. And actually, now I was reading, not that I know, but I mean, the sort of young cooks are out there. Everything's a TikTok, and it's sort of, down with the kids, cook it quickly and just point the camera and go. And people get, millions of subscribers and looking completely natural, engaging with your younger audience. Bearing in mind that those people doing that, they're in their 20-somethings. She's now in her 40s. So she's now... What she was doing 10, 15 years ago was relevant, but as we know, everything has moved on. I can't keep pace with it. I'm barely keeping up to speed with it all, and just sort of floundering away in a sea of confusion about what's relevant. But for people, the Gen Z, the young, they consume everything in 3-minute bite-sized chunks, and that means if you're putting out a 45-minute cooking program about in a sort of ivory, in someone else's villa, probably is not going to resonate with the young, who basically want to see it right. How can I cook something in 3 minutes, or what's easy, smashing everything together. That's what engages with people. I do feel, is trying to rediscover the key, but unfortunately the people who are doing it really well now are the new ones, and in 5 or 6 years' time those people might be irrelevant. I don't know, but the world evolves, and I don't think Meghan, podcasts have changed inexorably now. That's a different vibe. Everything has to be seen in a different light at all times, and at the moment I'm not entirely convinced. Podcasts, is there a video version? Every podcast now, just like this, is a video. Why aren't we seeing her interviewing these people? What's the mystery?
Yeah.
Why can't they be videoed sitting in a recording studio, or is it so heavily edited so that they can get away with it? I don't know. Why not? I mean,
that also could be
right.
That also could be an issue with Netflix, because Netflix might want first dibs on anything visual that she does.
Well, you're probably right there. So I mean, I don't know enough, but a podcast being done by somebody else, maybe they should have made sure they'd got the opportunity to, in their contract, that if I do this, I'm entitled to because it's
Well, they're her
something.
partners. They're her partners. Maybe she can go back and have that conversation. Well, speaking of her partners, an author has claimed recently, apparently this happened years ago, but we're just now hearing about it through the Daily Mail. An author has claimed that Meghan Markle's Pearl was similar to her own work, so much so that she reached out to Meghan and Netflix. And so this was teased at the beginning of the show. Meghan Markle embroiled in another plagiarism dispute. And this is a show that never actually came to fruition and was killed pretty quickly when it came to Meghan's Netflix deal. But it was announced in the initial Netflix deal that Meghan was going to produce this animated show about a young girl named Pearl, who learns to, quote unquote, step into her power and finds inspiration from influential women throughout history. And the Daily Mail talked to author Mel Elliott, who claims she sent a legal letter to Archewell and Netflix alleging possible infringement of her copyright. Now, she's the author of a series of Pearl Power books, which debuted in 2014, and the third book was actually released in 2016, and it's a similar message where Pearl Power meets, like, is it Billie Jean King? Billie King, is that the tennis player?
Billie Jean King, what a tennis player
Yeah.
she was. Yeah.
So with, powerful woman in history, and
such an icon she is, and what
yes.
she did for women's tennis and everything. She is right. She's a goddess.
Well, she endorsed these books too, and so now the author says, of course, I can't know if anyone on her team had seen it or was inspired by it, but the similarities were too great for me to ignore. She stressed, the world of arts and media are very competitive, and I'm afraid it's quite common for powerful people to rip off the work of less well-known creatives. Although I'm not saying that's what happened here, what saddened me most is having brought the similarities between my Pearl and Meghan's Pearl to the attention of Netflix and Archewell. My objection was never acknowledged. Neither Netflix nor Archewell responded to me. Well, you know what? Never complain, never explain. Always when it's convenient for them, Rupert. They ignore when it's convenient for them.
Well, yes, and it's once again issues over copyright, even as ever had issues with some a shop in New York, didn't there, and other, even the
Photographer, Confessions of a Female Founder already existed.
So it's another one. No, we don't know. It's a bit, you talk about, people suddenly say, well, I wrote that song, which turns out to be a hit, but actually,
these were published books that were published before Meghan had this deal with Netflix. I think it's a fair argument that Meghan Markle does not do her due diligence based on these previous accusations. She does not do. She told us in a New York Times interview, "I'm a dolphin, not a shark," that she likes to stay up late at night and Google fashion brands to find the fashion brands that align with her, that she invests in. Do you Google anything else? Like, serious answers only.
Well, you could presumably find out if you're thinking of calling something Pearl, and this book has been written by, and I think has reasonably sold well in various territories.
Translated into different countries, and languages.
And you could Google Pearl with Power, and is there something similar out there? Just put that in, and you probably would have come up and said, well, then perhaps I better call it something else. So therefore, once again, well, actually, in the end, obviously, Netflix looked at it and said, well, it probably might be a bit dull because they dropped it.
Not worth the hassle.
I think, and that. But again, it must be frustrating. But it's another thing that just shows that, she goes off and doesn't actually think about it and doesn't think about the consequences of her actions and thinks she's above, beyond reproach. And she's not. She's the same as anybody else. And these are some of the lessons that she should be learning in her podcast from her successful female founders, as the due diligence that various one or two of them have done to set up, whether it be Bumble or whatever other things that they've set up. I bet they had to go through every legal plan framework to make sure that everything was in order. I don't think she does that enough. She just sort of thinks, well, I'm Meghan, I'm the Duchess of Sussex, and well, I can get away with it.
I'm gonna bulldoze. That's what I get. I keep explaining it this way, because one of my girlfriends, she's a celebrity, and she is like one of Bravo's biggest stars. That's this channel here that pumps out like the most iconic reality shows ever. And she messaged me a link to a friend of King Charles's that was talking about kind of dismissively about Meghan's lifestyle brand, saying, you know, it's taken me a decade to know how to do this and this and this and this. And she's a woman that lives on an estate and runs, has a similar business. And I said it, Meghan doesn't care. She's just bulldozing her way into these industries because she knows deep down that it's her title that gets her, like you said a few minutes ago, her title gets her in the door, and she thinks she can break the rules. She thinks the rules don't apply to her because of her title, because of her vague association with the British royal family. That there was an executive here in LA that spoke to the Daily Beast that said, it's becoming quite clear that these two are no longer associated with the British royal family. The magic is running thin, because that was the only thing that we were interested in here in Hollywood. And maybe to that point, that's this desperation that Tom Bauer speaks of, this anxiousness that Tom Bauer speaks of, and this anxiety that we feel of them just dropping all of these projects on the world at once.
Well, and this is the problem for them, because their star, I feel, is definitely in the wane, because Harry is completely cut off from his family. So he's in royal family in name only, because he's the brother of the future king. Otherwise, he is just an ordinary citizen now. He lives in America as an ordinary citizen.
He's a resident. He's a resident.
He's a resident. He's a resident now, trying to eke out a living, but he doesn't know how to. He doesn't know what to do. He's not prepared to go and do a 9-to-5 job. If moved to America, well, what are you going to do? Well, because he just thinks that air of self-entitlement. Meghan's got the same, thinks that whatever she does is going to be absolute brilliant, doesn't listen to people to advise her. We've talked about Jason Knopf, one of the people who tried to give her advice, and people say, this is how you behave. We've also been hearing about the way she treats people. There's even an article come out, I read somewhere today, that we're finding out that Meghan was berating some gardener and the Queen had to intervene. So just generally her bully behavior through the, all the sort of thinking she knows best. It's floundering. But yes, she will make money. There will be some people supporting her, and we've got to accept that. But it's not in the level. If you've got people in America saying their brand is a little bit toxic, then you have a problem. Because,
and to your point, Prince Harry and Better Up, Prince Harry's been with Better Up since they stepped down from the British royal family, and the toxicity brand, or the toxicity narrative, has grown so fiercely over the last few years. If I were Prince Harry with Better Up, I would be breaking my back to contribute in a way that was so meaningful that I had people at Better Up going to other people in Silicon Valley, you got to get this guy on board. He's helping us out. He's done this for us. He's brilliant. He introduced us to these people. He's opened these doors for us. But again, he just flounders. He's just sitting back collecting a paycheck. Occasionally he'll do an online video for these people, and it's like, to your point, what the heck is he doing? Not enough.
Because when he makes these statements, you look at what he may be feeling, but then you actually have to take it outside his little bubble. He may be feeling the victim at times, but there have been people affected by his actions. So it's an all-round, and this is the problem for brand Sussex. It's sort of in its own floundering, in its own sort of bog.
Yeah.
They're looking for air and looking for a direction. And for Harry, he doesn't know where to go. And I have a degree of sadness for him, because he's 40 and he's got the rest of his life in front of him. He's got his children, but is he truly happy with where it's gone? Because if he was still able to be in the royal family. He'd be doing Centre Barley wouldn't probably have a problem. Would be earning lots of money. He'd be slipping over the Invictus Games. Would be happy because there would have been the royal infrastructure to help him.
His babies would have been playing with their cousins this Easter Sunday.
And it would have all been happy days. But unfortunately, that ship has sailed so far over the sunset, into the sunset, that it's not going to happen. And it is. But what everyone can see it except for those two in Montecito. Those two. And that is the problem.
I'll ask you this question before I let you go. Do you feel like we forgive and forget with politicians more so than we do with Harry and Meghan? Because it does feel like we hold these two accountable. Part of the reason why they keep hiccuping is because we have receipts from 2 and 3 years ago of things that they said. Or we can go, well, that's interesting that you said that they've affected your mental health. Here's page 73 of Spare, where you said this, which probably upset the Princess of Wales. When you said that about how Prince Harry is trying to talk about mental health, but also does things that negatively affect people's mental health, I wondered, are we harder on these guys than we are on some of the politicians in our lives?
That's a good question, but they create the problem for us because by their actions they create a further narrative that is a negative one. And therein lies the problem. I mean, it's even now like this court case that he comes back, he says there's no police protection. Well, if he comes back to England, he could stay in the Royal Palace, Buckingham Palace or somewhere, where there would be all the protection, yet he decides to stay in a hotel where they probably have and you think, why can't he just stay in Kensington Palace? Because all the protection and would be safe. So there's an awful lot of confusion in his world. And so he creates the negativity. He does not help himself. So yes, we're probably, overly hard. Politicians need all the scrutiny they can get, and quite rightly so. Should he be getting all the scrutiny? Well, from a British perspective, he inflicts a degree of frustration on members of the royal family by their actions. And as I say, they put themselves in the spotlight by their actions. And yes, we are probably hard on them, but they are creating the difficulty for themselves. No one else. It's we're picking up on their narrative. No one else is.
It's the front page of The Sun this morning. Grand bold Duke of York. Prince Andrew joined royals at their Easter church services yesterday, his first public outing in a year. Let's talk to Michael Cole, royal commentator and writer, to find out if this is the beginning of his brother Charles rehabilitating him. Could it be the case? Michael, very good morning to you. Happy Easter Monday.
Happy Easter Monday to you, Mike. Yeah, there was a full turnout. Of course, the King was there with his siblings. He had to be there as the Supreme Governor of the Church of England, of course. And there we see the Duchess of York, Sarah, Duchess of York, and she drops the lowest, the deepest curtsy I think I've ever seen when she sees the Queen, Queen Camilla. Yeah. So this was not exactly a rehabilitation of the Duke of York's position in life, far from it, because there's no possibility of that happening. But this was not a state occasion. It wasn't a royal event as such. It was a family gathering at Easter, a traditional one. And the King was there, and his younger brother also appeared. I'm quite sure he was pleased to be there, and his two daughters, Eugenie and Beatrice, were also there, along with Prince Edward, who's now the Duke of Edinburgh, of course, and his 70-year-old son, James, the Earl of Essex. So it was quite a good turnout, but not exactly a three-line whip. In the Queen's day, everybody would have been there. And of course, notable by their absence were the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate, and their children. They chose to be up in Norfolk, where the weather has been rather great lately, at Anmer Hall, having a family Christmas, presumably with Easter egg hunts and things of that kind. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Middleton family also featured there.
Well, you feel like you want to ask the question whether these two events are indeed connected. Did they decide not to go because they knew he would be there?
I don't think it would come to that quite yet. Of course...
it's quite convenient, though, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, indeed. I think it was mainly because it's the end of the way Easter's fallen. It's the end of the school holidays, and on Wednesday the children go back to school. And I'm sure the Prince and Princess of Wales wanted to have as much time with them as possible. Probably with the Middleton family. I don't know. It hasn't been confirmed whether that was true. But they have a lovely house there on the Sandringham estate, and if they can be there, why wouldn't they want to be there? Obviously, you know, for children, there's rather more interest in finding Easter eggs among the rhubarb leaves than they would be in attending matins. But there you are. There's some nice shots from presumably in. Oh, no, that was a little bit late earlier, wasn't it?
It was.
Of course.
Yeah. Let's have a little chat. We only got about a minute left. The Duchess of Sussex, i.e. Meghan Markle, a.k.a., plunged into a copycat row last night. A British author has apparently said she sent her a legal letter pointing out that there are so many striking similarities between Meghan's first children's TV show for Netflix and her own book.
Yep, infringement of copyright, and the lawyers say that the striking similarities could not be coincidence. Those with good memories, there we are, Pearl Power, that's written by a woman called Mel Elliott, who lives down in Hastings, and indeed has a daughter called Pearl, and that's got a heroine. That was written 7 years before the 2021 Netflix show called Pearl. That was about a young girl who finds inspiration and power from influential women from history. And in a nice sort of way, because she followed it up with two personal letters. Mel Elliott, written and illustrates her book, and her little girl always looks like that, wrote two letters pointing out the similarities and even hoping in her own mind that she might be able to collaborate with the Duchess of Sussex. But she received no replies at all. So it's an interesting case because infringement of copyright is a serious matter, but the Sussex people did not respond in any way whatsoever.
Right. Interesting. Well, we'll keep our eyes on that one.
Let's get to the bottom of the royal family, from Kinsey Schofield's bottom to a man who is a complete arse, the Duke of York. There was an extraordinary thing this Easter. There he was at the family Easter service, not trying to spread whatever. Extraordinary, and still leads me to believe that I'm right about this whole scenario, that he's got something over his brother, or his brother hasn't got the strength or the courage to finally cast him adrift. What did you make of it on a serious note?
On a serious note, I think we should all applaud Prince Andrew for having his butt in church. I think that is the best place for Prince Andrew to be. I mean, to be fair, he is innocent until proven guilty. No judge or jury found him guilty of anything he's been accused of. But in the court of public opinion, it's guilt by association, and he did associate almost unapologetically with Jeffrey Epstein. So I understand why people don't want the king anywhere near him. But at the same time, are we really going to discourage a man from going into church? I don't believe that he is going to weasel his way back into being a working royal, because in every story that's ever written about him for the rest of his life, there will be a paragraph about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein at the bottom, and that is poison. The royal family, can't risk that. But I don't necessarily understand discouraging him from going to church. I think he needs a little bit of Jesus.
But of course he would have used that, because he is, on a serious note, somebody who absolutely will not ever accept that he did wrong. And I'm just going to try a different opinion with you. Lady Victoria Hervey is very outspoken online and on many television stations and radio stations about this case, has called out Virginia Giuffre for months and years, has called her a serial liar, has garnered huge support for those views. I didn't get a chance to say this. I'm not condoning anything that did or didn't happen. She had 4 days to live 3 weeks ago, Virginia Giuffre. Apparently she's fine now. There's a lot of people who, at the same time, court of public opinion, Prince Andrew, but are starting to doubt a lot of the people that have been involved in that story. Thoughts on that at all, do you think?
No, I think that that's fair. I was mortified when I showed sympathy for Virginia Giuffre to discover that, you know, she was still alive and kicking, and everyone associated with the incident was like, that was not that big of a deal. So I do think I think it's fair to ask questions about the authenticity of her events surrounding her relationship with Prince Andrew, who says he never saw the woman in real life. He said, I have no recollection of meeting her whatsoever.
To be honest, you know, Victoria Hervey will tell you that the photographs are set up and everything. What I think is really interesting is your point. In the court of public opinion, he will never recover. Now, whether he's been stitched up, I would put it like this. I think he's an entitled idiot who, and I'm being completely serious, who doesn't read the room, who was always the favourite, who never ever was never realistic, right? And just carried on regardless. Never took a step back. Never thought I'm perhaps wrong relationship, wrong way of going about things, and it sort of caught up with him. I don't buy Virginia Giuffre, and there's many, I'm sure, hundreds of famous men who could well be associated with what went on with Epstein. It's just he's just not very good at making the right decision. In royal circles, he's always been known as somebody that wants to make a fast buck and surrounds himself with the wrong people. And I think that years of doing that probably came back and bit him on the backside.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of self-awareness must be a DNA thing, because I see a lot of it, what you talk about, the arrogance, the lack of self-awareness. I see that in Prince Harry as well. So, like the quick buck, Prince Harry, associating with people for cash that you probably shouldn't be. I've seen a little bit of that in Harry and Meghan as well, just trying to make a quick buck. So they're tearing into the royal family on international television. So no, I agree with you. I'm firmly in the corner of he cannot come back as a working member of the British royal family, but I'm not going to tear him to pieces for showing up to church with his siblings. I know that his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth, would want him to be there. Oh,
without any shadow of a doubt, and it would have been very interesting if this was 20 years ago and she was still around, because it's really interesting. That he was the favourite and he was almost excused, and there are many people who believe that was perhaps the reason that he turned out to be the way he was. Just to finish, despite the fact that I've had an email saying that you're a complete pain in the arse and you shouldn't be on talk. There you go. I should ignore that. It's fine. I can do with that. It's fine. Listen, shall I read it to you? Kyle, could we have less of your salacious and lecherous talk whilst I'm there? This is a primetime radio broadcasting, OK? Your rambunctious and frantic language sounds like verbal diarrhea.
Oh, I love a good verbal diarrhea.
Well, I was going to say that could have been from my mother, but she's dead.